Do the roll call.
Dingfelder, Goods, Maniscalco, Citro, Miranda, Carlson,
Here.
and Vieira.
Here. Okay. The commendation? Oh, yeah, of course. Yep. You know what, Sal, before we get you here, the folks who are getting our commendation need to be out by 5:30. Sal here has something that's very important that we have to vote on, but if you don't mind, sir, just waiting 10 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Citro.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies, can I please have you front and center?
No, I mean, I'll just read Joe's while he's up.
Mr. Chair and Councilman, could you please bear with me on this? Where's Tegan at?
Oh, me, I'm right here. Thank you.
Okay. And Julia? Okay, bear with me now. Bear with me. Lindsay?
Oh, which one?
Delegado. And your father is very busy today, isn't he? Cassidy. Emily,
Right here. Thank you.
you scored the winning run?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to be up next. Lily, where's Lily at? Bear with me, ladies. The other Lindsay. Olivia. Avery. Thank you. Jocelyn. Go. Lauren. Now we only have two left, so I hope I got you all here. Madison. And Sydney. Okay, Sydney, I'm going to keep yours for a second, okay?
Okay.
All right, coaches, you got to spread out a little bit. It's the ladies' day here now.
It's always the
Mr. Chair and Councilman, I am pleased to introduce to you the 2019 Softball Junior League World Series champions, the South Tampa All-Stars. These ladies have made not only all of Tampa proud, but South Tampa proud also. I congratulate you on your achievements. If I may read through this real quickly. Tampa City Council congratulates all of you for your outstanding participation in the South Tampa All-Stars and to your contribution that led them to the World Series championship at the Little League World Series in Kirkland, Washington. We are proud to honor all of you and your teammates, your managers, for their dedication, perseverance, drive, outstanding commitment to the game of softball. Ladies, again, you have made us proud. Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask you, I don't know how many of you saw this on all the sports channels and everything. But this young lady scored the winning run. You were down by 5 points, and you guys rallied in what, the 7th?
Yes.
And scored all the runs to tie. And this young lady scored. But what I need for you to do for me is do the impersonation of your coach, who is at third, waving you home. Please do that impersonation.
Right now?
Right now. Here, let me hold this for you.
Oh, God. Yeah. I'll go right here. Okay, so, I'm coming home, and first he's like a, and then he's just jumping. Oh. Thank you.
Ladies, I thank you again for making Tampa proud.
Thank you.
All right, now it's coach's time. Mr. Chadwick, Coach Chadwick. Mesra, Coach Mesra? No, you guys are going to come up here and make a couple statements. Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Mr. Campo? Coach, please. It's your turn. Head coach, excuse me.
All right, I'll make this short and sweet. I want to, first off, I want to thank you for our recognition. These girls really put in the hard work and the time and the dedication it took to do what we did. The hours of practice and games and traveling and it kind of took a toll on us. In the first two games we got to Washington, I think we did lose the first two games, and I didn't even sweat it. So, because we ended up winning the next 5 and winning the World Series. So, thank you again for all the recognition. These girls deserve it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
One question.
And Councilman Miranda.
Coach,
And before we go, Councilman Miranda had a
well,
question.
one question. How many runs were you in that bottom of that inning that you had to win? 4.
Well, it went like this. They scored 1 run in the second, 1 run in the third, and then 3 in the fourth. So we were actually down 5-0 at the time. We answered at the bottom of the fourth. We answered with 3 runs. So then the 5th, 6th inning, they scored another one. So it was 6-3, and then we end up scoring 4 total.
So, in other words, the odds of that in baseball to score 4 runs in the bottom of the last inning is about 1,000 to 1.
Yes.
So,
But I had
what was a
faith-
bunt single?
All of them. Yeah, 2 strike bunts. They called it.
2 strikes?
Oh, wait, it's 6.
If I'd have been coach, she'd have fouled out.
Yeah, we might not be standing here.
Well, congratulations, all of you.
Thank you. All right, coaches.
Again, I also want to thank you as well. At our Little Leagues, we know the city of Tampa is very involved, especially the Tampa Bay Little League, which is where I'm out of. The city gives us a lot of support with different things with respect to our fields, and we couldn't do it without the city as well, and the contributions you make to us, so thank you for that. And I just want to thank these girls, because if it wasn't for them, none of us would be here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank the city of Tampa. Great city. Emily's actually 5th generation South Tampa, so I'm very proud of her. I love all the girls. It's like a family. We have like a close family here. But I had a couple stories. The RV story was always on ESPN. Everybody kept talking about how we had to go to Salisbury, North Carolina to play regionals. And I rented an RV for the girls so we'd have fun, The air went out as soon as we got in the RV. So it was 100 degrees all the way up, and they were like yelling at me the whole way. But it was fun. I told them I was trying to get them in shape, for the heat. So it actually worked. Little problems. I know. But what a great experience with my daughter and these girls, and it was just wonderful. They will never forget it, ever. I hope not. But we could do it again next year, too, so I'll be back.
Mr. Chair, Council, 1 second. Now,
Take your time,
ladies,
Joe.
there is other important people that maybe you guys should recognize, like parents that may be out in the audience. Parents taking pictures. Stand up, parents. Stand up, family. All right, Council, you have anything you want to say?
Councilman Dingfelder.
You're still in it.
Councilman Citro, you stole my thunder. I wanted to give the shout out to the parents because I know from the age of 4 or 5 you've been dragging them to the fields and teaching them along the way, and sportsmanship and everything else that's important. And I'm as somebody born and raised in South Tampa, I couldn't be more proud of you. So thank you. Congratulations.
Anyone else? Councilman Carlson, and then Councilman Boots and Councilman Carlson, whichever first.
I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations again. With this kind of spirit and teamwork and hard work, I hope that when you all graduate from college, you'll come back to Tampa and make Tampa even better than it is now, because we need more smart, aggressive, successful people like you. So thank you so much for what you've done.
Councilman Boots.
Well, ladies, is a great accomplishment to be a world champion. I can say that because my district, Belmont Heights Little League has been a pinnacle of Tampa for many, many decades. Now you're in the history books. Myself coaching youth football for many, many years, I know what it is to be a coach. It takes a lot to be a coach, to endure going to practice when you don't want to go to practice, coaches. So I understand, and it's great that the leadership you've given these young ladies, and especially like Miss Miranda, who's the baseball guru of Tampa, to come back and to win. It's the best feeling in the world. You'll never, ever, ever forget what has happened. So congratulations to you all.
Thank you. Next, El Pelotero de Tampa, Charlie Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of things that go in life, but when you go back, what you accomplished more than likely will be the thing that you're going to think about the rest of your life. Because I know I had a chance once to win, but I'm the guy who gave up the home run to the Cubans. So I can tell you this, of all the things I've ever done, including serving here, the greatest thing I remember in my life was going to Cuba to play ball. And the camaraderie with the guys that I played with is still there. We still meet. And I remember the coach telling me one thing: you can make an error, you can't make a mistake. And you figure it out for yourself. It took me about 20 years to figure it out. But those words stayed with me the rest of my life. I want to congratulate you, the coaching staff, the parents, and all those who participated to make you who you are, including yourself.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on this great honor. I played Little League when I was a kid at the Temple Terrace Little League, and those were great days. They were, to quote Brian Adams, the best days of my life, and really, really good times. And in baseball, I grew up on baseball, and it sounds like the kind of last-minute play that happened was kind of a Kirk Gibson 1988 World Series type thing. So that's really good. So congratulations to y'all, and look forward to seeing you guys continue to grow in your future endeavors. Thank you. Sal, if you'd like to come up, sir.
Charlie, you got to wear it the whole meeting now.
Yeah, my mother told me another thing: never wear a hat inside.
Yeah.
My mother get mad at me.
The South Trail Legal Department. As you know, we have a hurricane that may be heading our ways, and we also have a budget hearing that we know is heading our way on the 3rd. So what I've done is I've prepared a resolution that I'm asking you to consider that if we do have, for some reason, we can't have the meeting on the 3rd, we have some alternate dates that we would use. The 3rd's hearing would then be held on the 11th, and that would also mean that the one for the 17th would have to be moved to the 24th because of timing issues. Part of the issues are you have to have a certain time to advertise, you have to have a certain time before you have the hearing, between hearings, and all those issues that are coming up. So what I've tried to do is put a resolution together in case that you have to postpone, you have to cancel your September 3rd hearing. There'd be a new schedule coming up for hearings. And I've also put in there, if for some reason it does not happen, then this becomes void. So that's kind of where we are on the resolution. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions from council? Councilman Dingfelder.
Not a question that, thanks for putting this together so quickly, Sal. Just more to Mr. Bennett and staff is, and maybe this goes without saying, but to make sure that the CTV, John, that the CTV covers this and scrolls these changes. So if we do change, that everybody gets the word out as best as possible on Channel 15. So, thank you.
It will be re-advertised as well. So
well, I know we'll have formal advertising,
sure.
But a lot of people watch, especially people who might come down, are the ones who are also watching CTV.
Okay, and any further comments or questions from council? And before we take a vote, I know Councilman Miranda moved for this. Is there anybody here in the public who would like to comment on this item? Okay.
Second.
And Councilman Citra, I just wanted to make sure, sir, just for purposes of calendaring, September 11th and what is it, 24th? Are those good on your calendar?
I will make them work.
Just making sure.
I will make them work.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilman Miranda and a second by whom? Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sal.
Okay, next we move forward to our workshop. And who from the city is here for this?
Move to open the workshop.
Yes.
Second.
And before we get in, I know we have a lot of people watching this. I kind of wanted to go over, if I may, some of the basic perimeters of what we're going to do, because we've gotten a lot of emails in terms of what's going to be discussed today, et cetera, and the perimeters. Here, the city is requesting that council approve a $300 million line item in an overall water and wastewater master plan budget called PIPES to develop an alternative water supply. This requires $300 million be allocated for that purpose. The city is recommending 4 options for city council and the public to consider at a workshop today at 5:01. This is only a workshop to introduce these items. No vote will occur tonight on this matter, and the 4 options are, as everyone knows, purchasing water from Tampa Bay Water, developing an indirect portable water system, developing direct potable water system, and then expanding the purple pipe system. So just for everybody out there watching in terms of the, I guess if you will, the scope of what's going to happen here tonight. So go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Cruz, City Clerk's Office. Can there be a vote on the motion to open, please?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We have a motion, I believe, by Councilman Miranda, and who seconded that?
I did.
Councilman Citro, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And Mr. Crew, it's good to have you here. Go ahead.
All right, good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Councilman. John Bennett, Chief of Staff, City of Tampa. I just wanted to kind of set a framework for what the staff is going to deliver tonight. As the Chairman mentioned, they're going to bring in 4 options, but as we know, and as the administration has encouraged in staff's presentation in support of our collegiality that we've been using, is that there's also a 5th option, which is do nothing. And I think it's important that we frame out that there's 4 options and there's the risk of a do nothing option. And I say that because if I had to walk in, and I've been doing the Great American Teach-In for 25 years, and if I walked into a classroom of middle schoolers or high schools and I had to explain how big this project is and how important it is to the Tampa Bay community and the region, I would also look to frame this in some decision support model. And what I thought about when I've been looking over the presentation as you have, even though I've only been here less than 10 days, trying to digest everything that's been going on to lead up to this project and this presentation tonight, I come down to 3 very critical things in what government does. Government is prideful in bringing water and taking it away. They're prideful in bringing public safety service to the community and all the other core infrastructure needs that we require to keep the community thriving. Water is obviously a very critical resource to our future. But when I get in that classroom, the things that come to mind is, what is it going to cost me over time as an individual, as a system, as an economy? What is the sustainability of that to me, others, and the community and the region and the environment? And then lastly, is it going to taste and have the same safety and level of quality? And I think as they go through the 4 options tonight, including the 5th option of doing nothing, that's the framework that I tended to look at it with. So I just wanted to share that perspective as the folks go through their presentation.
And Councilman Carlson.
I think it's important, like Chairman Vieira said, to separate the discussion next week from the discussion tonight. And the discussion tonight is specifically about these 4 options.
Yes.
And by the way, when I suggested the 4 options, I also suggested 2 more. So I always thought there were 6, and I know there may be hundreds of iterations of those. And we can talk about the other 2. But I think the do nothing option is the preferred option because there are questions about and maybe you were talking about next week when you said do nothing, but the do nothing option is the preferred option in my mind because there's not when I've talked to other water scientists outside the city of Tampa, there's not an immediate need for this project. There's not an immediate need for new water sources. We're at least 10 to 15 years away from needing new sources. I've asked in writing for the for the water department to answer my specific questions that were given to me by water engineers outside the city, and they did not respond to me in writing. They tried to respond to me on Monday verbally and dismissed the question. But the underlying question is here, do we need this? And yes, we will need this eventually. We'll need it in 15 or 20 years, or we'll need some other source in 15 or 20 years. But there are real serious questions about whether it's fiscally prudent to push this right now. and as I've said to you in the water department, there was a big push for this in the last administration, and the new administration, we inherited this. And I think we have to be, we have to look at it objectively, which I appreciate you're doing and the mayor has agreed to do. But the way the water department has acted, and I've said this to them privately also, is suspect. Pushing hard and probably they did this under direction of the last mayor, but pushing hard to try to get legislation in Tallahassee to change this, to bully the other regional members of the water authority, pushing litigation to ask for, in essence, to opinion shop on these things. When we asked to set the hearing for next Thursday, and I'm not picking on you, by the way.
No, I understand.
But when we asked for the I made the motion to put it, per the request, to put it on the agenda for September 5th, and Mr. Dingfelder was asking about whether we could discuss TAP, and I asked the water department, can we delay that till after September 5th? Can we delay all discussion about TAP until after September 5th? I went on vacation a couple weeks later, and they tried to slide through $670,000 to sell TAP as the preferred alternative. And all along I had been asking them, if that's your preferred alternative, show me the results. Show me the analysis you did. And they finally admitted that they didn't have the analysis. And then this week they said, we had the analysis all along, and they didn't give it to us. So the point is that they're not acting in good faith, and I don't trust the results that they've given. I've looked at this from a very high level. It's no ding on the mayor, because the mayor has inherited this situation. But we need to have objectivity in this, and we need to have scientists. If every other water scientist that I talk to says that their numbers are wrong, why should we invest the public's money, $10 to $15 million a year, for a project that we don't need? And there are a lot of questions around that. I'm going to listen tonight, and I'm going to ask tough questions. But besides the health issues and the environmental issues, which are talked, by the way, every time we counter an issue, they come up with a new excuse. The new one is saltwater intrusion, which just came up in the last couple weeks. And they actually put it twice and deleted it once today. But there seems to be a constant justification and selling of this project. And we need objectivity, because besides those other issues, there is a money issue. Why should we spend taxpayer money? My rough behind the napkin calculation is that of the $40 increase, the taxpayers are ratepayers are going to be paying $5 a month just for this. Why should we? They can't afford $40. Maybe $35 would be better. But why should we push something that they don't need for 5 or 10 years? It takes 4 years to build a project from start to completion, and we don't need this now. I will follow up more later. And again, I didn't mean to unload on you, but the option to do nothing is absolutely the best option. And when we get objective analysis from a third party, I think we'll prove that.
I appreciate the feedback. I learned a lesson. I went on vacation once and they transferred me in the police department, so I know what vacations feel like. And we of course we appreciate we're here to be transparent, do the workshop, and make sure that we give as much data drivers as possible to make an informed decision. So thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Councilman Goods.
I'm going to have some questions a little bit later on. I received an email memorandum that one of the constituents sent in of the meeting held on June 17, 2019, the minutes for the Tampa Bay Water. I think Councilman Miranda chairs on that committee there.
I don't chair, I'm just a member.
Member on that committee, and I got some questions in reference to the voting that occurred and some decisions that in question I have. You familiar with the meeting, Mr. Baird, on that date with that vote?
Yes, I am.
You tell me about it?
Is it? I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
And how about we do this if we can?
Yeah.
Let's let the presentation go forward, and we'll save questions at the end just to get it all out there, and so we don't do it piecemeal. But you'll be first.
No problem, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So in June of this year, a couple months back, we came before you and went through 4 options, very high level. Councilman Dingfelder called me up here and went through those 4 options. Today, Mr. Chuck Weber will get up and go through those 4 options in much, much more detail. So this is not a workshop to review the pipes, for instance, or the pipelines in the neighborhoods, to repair or line wastewater pipelines, to replace water pipelines. This is to focus on water supply alternatives and for Mr. Weber to show what the needs are, when we need the water, how conservation plays into that, and what are the costs of the 4 alternatives, and what are the benefits of those alternatives. And so there's a lot to present, but this is not a workshop to vet the 4 options. Not to vet them, not to select them. This is just the beginning. The next step is to take the 4 options out to the public and get their input. So, that at that point, we would like to come back to you in possibly October, I don't have a time frame, and propose an agreement with the firm to do exactly that. Not any one alternative, but all 4. And that's important because we need to get the information out there. And then finally, I want to say that out of the $3.2 billion, there is roughly $300 million in there for one of these 4 alternatives. Not for one alternative, one of these 4 alternatives. And we are proposing to keep that in there as a placeholder as we go through this public engagement program. So at some point, at a later point, early next year, hopefully, we can, work together to select an option to go forward. And with that, I would like to turn it over to
Let's hold all
Chuck.
questions towards the end. Is it something pivotal? Okay, but let's, as a general rule, please hold all questions unless it is something mandatory.
But you said that we could hold it. So 2-3 months ago, I asked you in front of this group, in front of TV cameras, could you hold the discussion of TAP until after September 5th? And you said yes. And now here we are. And I seconded the motion, but that's because there was a whole campaign between the time you said yes and now. So how can we trust the fact that you're saying that you're going to go out and engage the public and come back to us with another option? How do we trust that you're not going to change what you just said since you did it before?
This workshop could have been held after September 5th. There was no reason it couldn't have.
Because
as I said,
and let's hold all further questions unless if it is something, unique to that moment until after the presentation. After that, fire away.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Weber.
Good evening, Chuck Weber, Water Department Director. Going to start tonight with a short video that's going to talk about the need, the current need we have, the future needs, and also talk a little bit about conservation. So with that, if the AV folks could help us out with the video, I'd appreciate it.
The city of Tampa needs a sustainable water supply now and for decades to come. Tampa's drinking water comes from the Hillsborough River Reservoir. This reservoir can hold about 1 billion gallons of water. The Southwest Florida Water Management District issued the city of Tampa a water use permit, allowing the city to withdraw on an annual average up to 82 million gallons from the reservoir per day. Over the decades, the reservoir has served the people of Tampa well, but there have been periods of stress. Most recently, Tampa experienced a drought in 2017 that caused our demands for water to exceed our permitted water supply. Most likely, this will happen again. As our population grows, periods of drought will place too much strain on the reservoir. There won't be enough water to meet the needs of our friends and neighbors throughout the city. In fact, the Potable Water Master Plan, completed by Black & Veatch, estimated that Tampa's water demand, even during a year of normal rainfall, will exceed its permitted water supply by 2026. Conserving water has always been important to the city of Tampa. Back in 1989, we launched a program promoting a tiered rate structure for water consumption. As residents increased their water use, the price per gallon also increased. Through this conservation program, per capita water usage was reduced by 41% as of 2018. A key thing to note is that the city is required to provide minimum flows downstream of the reservoir in order to protect the environment of the lower Hillsborough River. We currently rely heavily on Sulphur Springs to meet the minimum flows. However, there is growing concern that continued heavy reliance will cause Sulphur Springs to become more saline, and that could have a negative environmental impact. Our city is the first in the Tampa Bay area to implement a landscaping and irrigation ordinance. While fines and citations enforce irrigation regulations, the city also uses educational activities and workshops to promote water conservation practices. The Tampa Water Department even offers free irrigation system audits to its customers. The City of Tampa gives water-saving devices to customers for free. Devices such as low-flow shower heads, water faucet aerators, toilet leak detection dye tablets, and pre-rinse spray valves help customers save money and the environment at the same time. The City of Tampa will continue with current conservation efforts, and new projects are on the way. An advanced metering infrastructure system and a customer water use information portal will better inform you about the best ways to improve water usage and quickly signal your mobile device about any water leaks at your home or business. Although we've made great strides in protecting Tampa's water supply, these efforts are not enough to eliminate the need for an additional source to meet our growing demands for water. That's why it's so important that we find a secure, sustainable water supply to meet our water demands during periods of drought. We need water now and for decades to come.
Okay, with that, I'll jump into a presentation. We're going to talk about first the considerations and the assumptions that went into the analysis. It's important to understand the considerations and assumptions up first, otherwise the analysis isn't going to make too much sense. After that, we're going to talk about the option details. We'll go through the 4 options in detail, talk about the background, talk about any history associated with that option, when they may have started. If there's any reports related to them, we'll indicate those. After that, we'll talk about the benefits and the costs and the challenges with each option. And at the end, we'll have a summary in a table format of all the different options. And then we'll have just a couple short recommendations and then questions and answers. So starting with the drinking water supply, like the video had mentioned, this is essentially the same chart that was in there, just slightly different colors. In 2017, our demand did exceed our permitted use, which is 82 million gallons a day on the Hillsborough River. And that will typically happen in droughts from here on out. It was a rather modest drought during that time. Also, just normal demands are predicted to exceed our permitted capacity in 2026 based on our master planning efforts. I would put out or mention that the demands used in the 2016 master plan that we did with the city are within 1 million gallons a day of Tampa Bay Water's master plan numbers as well. So they're essentially the same numbers. This graphic kind of puts our water demand in perspective with the other 5 members of the Tampa Bay Water. We are the single largest user of water in the Tampa Bay Water, and we essentially at this point supply all of that water. The other thing to note on this graphic is that in addition to the city of Tampa, Hillsborough and Pasco are the only other 2 members that are showing any growth in their water demand for the next 25 years. Another really important thing that often gets overlooked when we're looking at water supply, our water supply is linked to the minimum flows on the Hillsborough River. And not only are we required by law to meet those minimum flows, it's important to maintain the environment and not to harm our wildlife in that area. So minimum flows are maintained by pumping water from Sulphur Springs out of the aquifer, which for those who are new to that term, it's essentially a layer of weathered rock that's porous and it acts like a sponge. It holds water. So Sulphur Springs will pump water out of that aquifer, and it'll pump it up to the base of the Hillsborough Dam right here. And that's how we supply the minimum flows that run down through the river with fresh water. The problem is Sulphur Springs is, it's not as fresh as it used to be. It's getting saltier. And the rate at which it's getting saltier is accelerating. And what that means is this will not be a viable source in the near future for providing the minimum flows on the Hillsborough River. We're going to have to find another source. This chart, it's kind of hard to read, but really what I want to show you is the slopes of these lines here. This is a chart taken from a paper that was done by a USF research student doing research on Sulphur Springs. And what he did was he associated the salinity with Sulphur Springs over the years, and since 1945 you can see it was steadily increasing up to 2002. And in 2002 is when we started pumping for minimum flows. And you can see a drastic change in the rate at which the salinity is increasing in Sulphur Springs. This is not a sustainable solution, and we need to take care of it. To explain how the salinity is increasing, this graphic was offered. On the top, it kind of shows the pool of Sulphur Springs. If you look and you go downward, you can see there's vents through the aquifer, and they go all the way down to layers in the aquifer where it's very salty. So as we pump water out of Sulphur Springs, we are siphoning that salty water up into the vents and the aquifer. That's how it's becoming more salty. Before I get into that, I wanted to mention some of the other environmental benefits. Nutrient removal from the bay is certainly a consideration when we're looking at these options. Saltwater intrusion barrier, providing a saltwater intrusion barrier underneath the city is another important environmental consideration. Also, keeping the region in mind. With the Tampa Bay region, one of the reasons that the authority was created was to reduce the reliance on groundwater. So if we choose an option, we ought to be looking at choosing an option that does that. Also, we ought to be considering whether or not the water source is a new source for the region or if it's using existing sources. And then finally, for regional considerations is cost to the region. Last year in 2018, through Tampa Bay Water, we did an analysis that looked at if the city of Tampa built and paid for a project to supply its future needs, the region would essentially have a net savings of close to $34.7 million. Oh, I forgot to mention grant funding eligibility is another consideration. Some of these projects aren't going to be eligible for grant funding. Others are, so there's a potential that we could save some money on them. And lastly, some of these projects currently cannot be permitted, so they don't have a regulatory project.
Chuck, can you repeat that last statistic?
Councilman Dingfelder is recognized.
Thank you.
The financial statistic?
Just the last number that came out of your mouth.
$34.7 million?
Yeah, say it again.
Okay. In 2018, through Tampa Bay
Let me remind
Water.
council members, please, no questions during the presentation.
I know, but it,
2018,
I
we,
can't hold that question.
through Tampa Bay Water, did an analysis to look at what would be the net effect on their region if the city of Tampa built and paid for a water project, capital project, to supply its water needs for the future in lieu of Tampa Bay Water building those facilities. And then there would be an offset to that capital in the revenue that would be provided to Tampa Bay Water from the city of Tampa with the purchase of the water. So what this analysis did is it looked at the net effect of those two things. And what it showed was that there is a potential for $34.7 million in savings for the region if Tampa builds the project and pays for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so those were some of the considerations. Now I want to move into some of the assumptions. When we were looking at how much water we were needed for each option, we wanted to make sure that it was understood we were going to use our existing permitted capacity. So the 82 MGD that we're permitted for is used in each of these options before we use the other water source. The other thing that we assumed was in order to take care of droughts, we would take the projected demands and increase them by 10% so that we could handle droughts as well. And then in addition to that, just wanted to note that we used the 2016 master plan projections, which again are within an MGD of the Tampa Bay water projections, so they're essentially the same. The other assumption that's important to note is with Tampa Bay water purchase, we included additional treatment. We did that because it's in our history of purchasing water from Tampa Bay Water, we experienced taste and odor water quality problems. In 2017, we had such an event. This chart shows what happened. You can see the background, January through February. Before we started purchasing water, the taste and odor events were very low. But in April in particular, we had over 200 odor complaints and over 125 taste complaints. And then that tapered off as we tapered off our use of the Tampa Bay purchased water. An additional assumption is recoveries for direct potable reuse. Direct potable reuse is just a fancy way of saying turning reclaimed water into drinking water. And when you do that directly, you don't put it in the environment. So for those scenarios where we're using membranes, 80% of the water we put into the process will come out the other end. 20% will have to get recycled. So it doesn't really produce a one-to-one ratio. And that same effect happens with indirect potable reuse, and that's essentially the same thing as turning drinking water, reclaimed water into drinking water, but in indirect, you put it through the environment first. You'll put it into the aquifer or into a lake or a stream, and then withdraw it and treat it at a drinking water plant. And in those scenarios, you can have recoveries of 90%, and that's what we assumed when we did this analysis. And then an assumption that was made for the purple pipe system, which is basically the irrigation systems using reclaimed water. We also have industrial users. And that's the non-potable reuse. It's essentially taking reclaimed water and using it for irrigation, industrial uses, but not drinking. So for those, we had to make sure that what we did was have enough irrigation and enough use of that reclaimed water through that system to offset the drinking water that would have been used to put in the ground for irrigation.
And I'm actually going to interrupt you. Can I have somebody please speak to the folks out there? Just tell them that we're having a meeting. And Mr. Bennett, you don't have to just, whoever, continue.
So it's important to offset that, because if you don't offset all the drinking water demand, then you have to do this project and another project to meet that remaining drinking water demand. So those were the assumptions that were made in the analysis. These are a list of options again. You've seen them a couple times now. The first option is to purchase water from Tampa Bay Water. The second option is the direct drinking water reuse. It has two alternatives, Alternative A and Alternative B. The Alternative A is the system, and it includes flows that can support the minimum flows on the Hillsborough River. Alternative B is essentially the same system, but it does not, it's not sized for, nor is it going to be operated in a manner in which it will provide the minimum flows for the Hillsborough River. And you'll get to see what the differences are between those in a moment. Option 3 is the direct potable reuse, and Alternative A uses ozone and biologically activated filtration, which are some pretty sophisticated systems, as pre-treatment before membranes. And Alternative B uses ultraviolet disinfection as pre-treatment before using membranes. In option 4, the purple pipe we've already discussed as well. So moving into the detailed explanations and discussion, option 1 is purchasing water from Tampa Bay Water. This option really became available in 1998 when we joined through the interlocal agreement. One of the things that happened during that interlocal agreement was some changes at Morris Bridge Wellfield. This graphic kind of indicates where Morris Bridge Wellfield is. This is Bruce B. Downs and I-75, and Morris Bridge Wellfield runs down through this area here. And right here is the Morris Bridge Treatment Plant, which is now really just a pump station. And this is a close-up of that same area. And the way this works is when we own the well field, the water would come into this treatment process, which has now been sitting idle for 20 years. But we would do lime softening here and other treatment processes to treat the groundwater. It would go into the storage tanks and then be pumped out to the distribution system. When we joined Tampa Bay Water, we sold the well field, and Tampa Bay Water now treats the water with chlorine and ammonia, and they blend it with other water from other sources in their system. The water, I believe, runs through this ground storage tank and through this pipe here into our storage tanks over here and is pumped out to the system. So this treatment plant is bypassed, but we are still using the pump station that's located in this building here. With the interlocal agreement, that's what limited our permitted water use on the Hillsborough River to 82 MGD. With that agreement, we are required to provide that first 82 MGD. After that, Tampa Bay Water would be required to provide us additional water, but we are required to provide that first 82 MGD. We have used Tampa Bay Water primarily and really only for drought relief in the last 20 years. And as I mentioned previously, we have experienced water quality issues when we do that in the form of taste and odor problems. One of the other things I wanted to bring to your attention that's a little different than it was in the past is Tampa has 3 pressure zones, and this really only occurred over the last 3 years. In this graphic kind of shows we have a pressure zone in New Tampa area, and then this is called the David L. Tippin pressure zone because it runs off of the high service coming out of the treatment plant. And then in South Tampa, and this is south of Gandy, Tampa, we have a pressure zone area down here as well. What these pressure zones allow us to do is they allow us to minimize the detention time of the water in the system, and so the water age is less, which helps with water quality problems. It enables us to reduce the amount of flushing that we do in the system. It saves water. In addition to that, for New Tampa, it's at a higher elevation, and when we used to pump directly from the David L. Tippin water treatment plant, we couldn't generate enough pressure to get water to the 3rd or 4th floor, and sometimes even the 2nd floor in a building that was at the end of the system. So in the last 2 years, we set up a temporary barrier using valves here, and we pump water from that Morris Bridge pumping station into this system at a higher pressure. And when we did that, all the pressure problems went away. We no longer have pressure problems there. However, looking forward and how this relates to option 1, if we purchase water, all the water we purchase will go into New Tampa only because it's isolated after it hits this pressure zone. Now, there is the opportunity, we could do some more valving and pumps and pipes to send the water to other locations, but that's not included in the analysis. So I wanted to make sure that that was understood as we go forward discussing and looking at the options. The last thing I wanted to mention about option 1 was just kind of show our history of usage. This graphic shows the large bars each year how much water Tampa Bay Water has produced. And the small blue bars that are kind of hidden behind the small light bars are how much water the city of Tampa purchased in million gallons per day. The light blue bars I put in there just kind of as a percentage so you can get an idea. Out of all the water that Tampa Bay Water produces, we've never purchased over 10% of it, and most years or quite a few years anyways, we don't purchase any. So that's looking backwards. That's our history. Looking forward, based on Tampa Bay Water's master plan numbers, the amount of water that we're going to be purchasing in the future really isn't that much either. It's pretty much on par with our past. This in 2040 represents, I believe, 6.5%, and that would be the single biggest year that we've had going forward in the future. Overall, if you average the percentage of water purchased through this time period, it amounts to 3%. So I just wanted to have a perspective of even though we represent 1/3 of the demand for the system, we are capable of supplying just about all our demand in the past, except for droughts, and in the future, except for a small percentage. This is the configuration of the treatment process that we contemplated in the analysis. In the upper left here, it shows the Tampa Bay water storage facilities and the pumps. And then from there, we would have to move it to a transfer pump station to give the water the energy to flow through the treatment process. The first step in the process is lime softening. That's the same process that used to be there at Morris Bridge we were using. The groundwater blends, sometimes the groundwater can be harder than what we have in our system. The alkalinity and the pH can be different as well. This will help us match the alkalinity, pH, and other water quality parameters that we have throughout the rest of our system. The other treatment process here is dual media filters, and that'll help with finishing and polishing off the water after the lime softening. After that, the water will move through a clear well and be pumped into the system. We'll also have some lime sludge residuals to dispose of with this treatment process as well. So the benefits...
And Councilman Carlson, I know you want a challenge, and I promise you, you'll be first up. I mean, I think that's Councilman Goods, then you'll be up. Councilman Carlson, no, let's please wait. Please respect the chair. Please respect the chair in the process, Councilman. Thank you. Go ahead.
The benefits of this project is that it has the potential to meet the drinking water needs for Tampa for a long time. So that is a plus. And there are no regulatory or permitting issues with this project as well, or with this option. The cost for this option, the net present value total, including capital and O&M, is $465 million roughly, capital being $260 million, with O&M costs net present value around $259. Some of the challenges is this does nothing for providing for the Hillsborough River minimum flows. It doesn't help with the Sulphur Springs. There's no nutrient removal from the bay with this option. There's no saltwater intrusion barrier, and it's not eligible for grant funding. Option 2, the indirect potable reuse, has 2 alternatives. Alternative A includes the minimum flows. This project this option was studied extensively under the Tampa Augmentation Project, which started in December 2013. The graphic on the right kind of shows where these different components are located. Down here at the Howard F. Kern Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant, we'll be using a UV, and then we'll have it run through a pipeline to the well field. And then at each of these recharge wells, we'll have another UV system to further disinfect the water before it goes into the ground. So that we'll have the recharge wells, and then we'll have the recovery wells, which will pull the water out of the ground, and another pipeline that will take the water back to the David L. Tippin drinking water facility. So with this assumption, we also have to increase the capacity at the treatment plant a little as well. And the way this alternative will be operated is we would keep the reservoir full at all the time, and that's what would help us really be able to support the minimum flows on the Hillsborough River. This shows the configuration of this option, just kind of schematically, the different treatment processes. It really starts in the collection system where we gather the wastewater. The wastewater is treated at the Howard F. Kern Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant. There are several treatment processes that are designed to purify the water there. After that, it will go through a transfer pump station to a UV disinfection where it will be further purified. Then it will go through a transmission system to a recharge UV disinfection recharge well. And I'll point out at this point, when the water is put into the ground, it will meet primary drinking water standards. And and beyond just meeting standards, any harmful things that aren't in the standard yet, we will monitor for and treat for, and they will not go into the aquifer. After putting it in the aquifer, we'll recover the water, and then send it to the drinking water facility, where it will go through several other processes, including the ozone and biologically activated filtration process, which has been demonstrated to remove very numerous contaminants, even the ones that aren't regulated. So the benefits of option 2, there is a regulatory pathway. This project is permittable. It provides for drought proofing. It provides for Hillsborough River minimum flows. It does remove nutrients from the bay. It does provide a saltwater intrusion barrier. It improves sulfur springs. It will actually reverse the salinity of sulfur springs by putting the reclaimed water into the aquifer. It's actually fresher than the saline water in that area, so it will help freshen sulfur springs through those vents that we talked about earlier. It is eligible for grant funding. It does provide an additional regional water supply, and one that doesn't rely on groundwater. And it provides a regional cost savings, as we talked about that report earlier. The costs for this alternative in this option, the net present value is roughly $438 million, with capital costs at $307 million, and an O&M net present value of $131 million. This option is not supported by Tampa Bay Water, and that is a challenge. Option 2, alternative B, this is essentially the same option, but it's smaller in size because it's not treating as much water, and it's designed for less capacity, and it doesn't support minimum flows. It's for drinking water only. So the process is essentially the same, but I wanted to point out in the diagram, these pumps would be sized smaller. This disinfection system would be sized smaller. This pipe would be a 42 instead of a 48-inch pipe. We wouldn't have as many of these wells. So that's the difference between those two alternatives. So you can see the benefits are essentially the same, but they don't include minimum flows for the Hillsborough River. There is a regulatory pathway. It does provide drought proofing. It provides some of a saltwater intrusion barrier. It is eligible for grant funding. It provides an additional regional water source that isn't groundwater dependent, and it provides regional cost savings. The cost for the project, the total cost is $375 million. The capital cost is $277 million, and the O&M net present is $97 million. And again, a challenge for this one is it doesn't provide any Hillsborough minimum flows, and it also is not supported by Tampa Bay Water. Option 3 is direct potable use. And again, this is turning reclaimed water into drinking water without going through the environment. The first alternative is using ozone and biologically activated filtration as a pretreatment to the membranes. So as a background, this option was investigated as part of the Tampa Augmentation Project. The components include ozone. BAF is short for biologically activated filtration. It has ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, ultraviolet disinfection, advanced oxidation procedures, and it has post-stabilization and chloramination, which is where you add chlorine and ammonia, and it also has a pipeline involved in it. So to represent that graphically, it's a little bit longer system here, but you can see like the other option, like the indirect option, it starts with the collection system, monitoring that and making sure we know what's coming into the plant, the advanced treatment processes that happen at the wastewater plant, moving into ozone, and then biologically activated filtration, and then it gets chlorine and ammonia, and then microfiltration, then an anti-scalant, and then reverse osmosis, hydrogen peroxide, UV disinfection, lime stabilization, chloramines, and then it goes to the distribution system. So that is a typical advanced direct potable system. It does have the benefit of providing drought proofing. It does remove nutrients from the bay. It is grant funding eligible. It does provide an additional regional water source that does not depend on groundwater, and it does provide regional cost savings. It does have a significant cost, $666 million almost, The capital cost being $418 million, with the O&M net present value at $248 million. However, one thing to note about direct potable reuse in Florida, currently there is no regulatory pathway for that. However, there is hope in the near future that we will have regulations that will allow us to do direct potable reuse. Another challenge for this option is it's not supported by Tampa Bay Water. There are no Hillsborough minimum flows with this option. It doesn't help Sulphur Spring reverse the salinity there, and it doesn't provide a saltwater intrusion barrier. Alternative B is essentially the same option, but instead it has ultraviolet disinfection as the pre-treatment. I'm just going to skip to the graphic and talk through the components. You can see it's a little shorter in treatment process, but the addition of the, let me get my mouse here. The addition of the UV at the Howard F. Curran Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant is added there at the end of all the other processes that are already there. Then it goes through chloramines, which is chlorine ammonia, microfiltration, an anti-scalant, reverse osmosis, hydrogen peroxide, and then advanced oxidation with UV, lime stabilization, chloramines, and then directly into the drinking water distribution system. So those are two alternatives for option 3. The benefits of the second alternative include the drought proofing. It removes the nutrients from the bay, grant funding eligibility, and it provides additional regional water for the area, and it's not a groundwater source. The cost is slightly less, a total of $547 million, with capital being at $298 million, and then O&M, the net present value being at roughly $250 million. Like the first alternative, there's no current regulatory pathway. This project can't be permitted under existing regs. It is not supported by Tampa Bay Water. There's no Hillsborough River minimum flow benefit or no Sulphur Springs improvement with this project. It doesn't reverse the salinity. And then again, there's no saltwater intrusion barrier. So with that, we'll move on to option 4, which is a little different. So instead of providing a brand new source of water, what we're doing is expanding water for drinking. We're expanding the purple pipe system, and we're going to use that for irrigation and industrial purposes to offset the drinking water. So this option has been studied in depth for some time. The South Tampa Area Reclaim Project, which was an irrigation project, began in 2003, roughly. And in 2009, there was a master plan done on this to figure out how much would it cost us to expand this throughout the city and maybe even beyond. And what they found in this study was that it's very expensive. It was cost prohibitive back then. In 2011, there was the study was used kind of as a basis to look at doing some small extensions, even in just South Tampa, where the system already existed, and even that was found to be cost prohibitive. So one of the key assumptions, just to remind you with this option, is you have to offset the drinking water demand with the irrigation that's provided from the reclaim, or you're going to have to do another project to make up for that difference. This graphic, I apologize, it's hard to see. It was the only, I had a blurry copy, but I wanted to point out the difference between what was the alternative that was recommended from that 2009 study was alternative 2. And back then that cost about $341 million. But important to note is, I apologize, it only replaced 12.2 million gallons a day of drinking water needs. And in 2040, we're going to need 16 million gallons a day. So this is not going to cut it. What we looked at was the option, when we did the analysis, was the one that can offset 24.7 million gallons a day. Back then, that cost $1.4 billion roughly, and as we trued up the numbers, it's $1.7 billion today. So I wanted to show you how we got to that before I actually show you that bad news. The benefits for this project, there is a regulatory pathway exists. It is permittable. It does remove nutrients from the bay. It is eligible for grant funding. It does provide an additional water source because it offsets water that would be needed from the region otherwise. And it does provide a regional cost savings if the city of Tampa builds it and pays for it. The net present value I mentioned was it's close to 1.8 billion. The capital cost is really where things come from. And as we get into discussing this and getting public feedback, we can take a closer look at these numbers and look at many different iterations. But for this analysis, this is how we looked at this. And then the O&M net present value was at 68 million. This option does nothing for the Hillsborough River minimum flows or in the improvement of the salinity at Sulphur Springs. It doesn't provide a saltwater intrusion barrier. And there could be some potential regulatory issues down the road. When you have a purple pipe system and one of the pipes breaks, you have to report it. It's a reportable event. And in the future, it looks like those might even be a fine every time you have a main break on a reclaimed water system. So that could be a potential quagmire if we have all these pipes running through our whole system, let alone the small system we have right now. So this is the big one. This is the summary that kind of shows all those different options, their capital costs, their O&M costs, the total net present value, and then it shows the considerations and how each project stacks up against all the considerations that we talked about. So I'm not going to read through the table again. I think we've covered all this stuff in detail. So I'll move right on to kind of the recommendations. As we mentioned earlier, this workshop wasn't designed to choose an option. I didn't go into near the detail that we need to talk about to choose an option. This is merely just to introduce the options. We need more discussion. We need more public input. And we're definitely going to need a sustainable water source in the future. And we need drought proofing right now. And we definitely want to avoid coming back to the public asking for another rate increase in the next year or so after we consider this one this year. With that, I'll open it up. Our next steps really, we want to look towards public input. We want to retain a public engagement firm and have them engage the public on all 4 of these options. We want to discuss the options, and then ultimately we need to choose an option. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Okay, I know Councilman Goods had a question, then Councilman Carlson, and whoever after that. Did you?
I'm going to go in there for Mr. Carlson. I know he's about to bust over now.
Are you sure you need that caffeine?
I'm joking. Get it out.
Go ahead, sir.
First of all, Councilman Vieira, my conflict's not with you, or my issue is not with you, so I apologize for being.
Hey, listen, man, we all have our moments. I take nothing personal, sir.
But I could spend the next 4 hours. We could be here till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning if you want, and I'll go through every detail of this, and I'll prove that there is skewing and manipulation of the data and manipulation of the words. And the example that I gave just now is water quality, which every other engineer I spoke to disagrees with. The other member governments in the region drink that water, and for some reason the city of Tampa says that the water quality is bad. The difference is the source is different, and you just saw by their treatment that they're treating it differently because it's a different source. And we need other engineers to come in here to show this. I think we ought to do an audit on this process. City Council by charter has the right to do an audit. I think we ought to do an audit to look at this entire process from start to finish, to look at the emails, to look at the correspondence on it, to look at the outside manipulation by other groups. Short of an audit, this is in no way factual and ready to go to the public. It needs to be looked at by a third party. Ms. McLean suggested in my conversation with her the other day, maybe we should go to AWWA or some other industry group, get a peer review of this, get some consultants who would not get contracts with the city of Tampa in the next 5 years. Somebody needs to look at this and validate it. I mean, I can go through this over the next few hours, but the last option that we're using, old data, we need 16 MGD in 21 years, and we're going to pick an option that that requires 24 MGD. I mean, there's a manipulation of the numbers to try to sell, and I can go through all the details if you all want, and I can rip every part of this apart. But the thing I would urge you all to do is to look at this with suspicion And let's find somebody else to validate it before we take this to public. The last comment I'll make, unless you want me to go through all the details, is when we made the motion, I made the motion to put September 5th on the agenda to approve the 3.2 to review the 3.2 billion. I said, and you all approved, that we wanted robust public engagement. They did 4 public meetings and they presented at Cafe Con Tampa. I don't know what else they did. As far as I can see, I went to 3 of the meetings and my aide went to all 4. We had more people at Cafe Con Tampa than they had at all the other 4 public meetings. In the one last night, the staff almost, other than some students, the staff outnumbered the attendees. There was not very much communication on it. And so we're going to walk into next Thursday, because they didn't publicly engage the public on it. And I assume that the numbers and information they presented was factual, because I haven't had time to review it. But they didn't engage the public. And so what this is going to be, if we send it to the public, it's going to be a whitewash. We're going to send them something that's not factually accurate, that uses terms that aren't accurate. And they're going to present it to the public in a half-hearted way, and they're going to come back to us and tell us the same thing they already did. That TAP is the best project. The public doesn't want that. The public doesn't trust the numbers. The public doesn't trust the city. And it's not the mayor. The public loves and trusts the mayor. The public, I assume, loves and trusts the new chief of staff. But for some reason, this department keeps pushing this project, and we need to find out why. We need a third party review it. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda and Councilman Guzzi.
Goose was first. I'm sorry, I yielded to you. No,
Hey, how about-
I want to go how it was. Roll call, you were second. I'm not going to take that.
A gentleman, un caballero. Go ahead.
Well, like I said, I received an email earlier. I have not had a chance to read all of the document. Apparently, there was a meeting on June 17, 2019, and the minutes of the meeting were sent to me. And apparently, there was a vote at that meeting. And I'm just concerned, what are our contractual obligations with Tampa Bay Water, and also about this vote that was taken in reference to possible an outside source looking into this project? I think Mr. Miranda somehow withdrew from the issue. Maybe you can speak on that, but I'm just curious about what I've read. Are you familiar with this information in the minutes of this meeting?
I'll defer to Jan. She was there.
Good evening, Mr. Goods, Mr. Chair, and the council. Jan McLean, Office of the City Attorney. I did appear over the last year at each of the board meetings at Tampa Bay Water, and this one especially, which was the meeting at which a cooperative funding agreement between Tampa Bay Water and the City of Tampa was to be considered for $1.6 million, which was the money that Tampa Bay Water had offered to the city in lieu of money that we were trying to seek from the Southwest Florida Water Management District to help co-fund the next portion of the project. I don't know if you want to ask me specific questions.
I just want to know kind of the generality. I have not had a chance to really go through it because it was late when my aide sent this off the email, but I had it. I wanted to know about that vote, what kind of the particulars of it. When I saw Mr. Moran's name, he withdrew from the issue, so I just want to kind of get a little view of what that was about and the obligations with Tampa Bay Water, because it seems like even within the presentation that Tampa Bay Water doesn't agree with some of the things we want to do versus what they want to do. So I'm just trying to get an outfit on where we're at with that, or what our obligations are.
Well, I could certainly give you the background on the City of Tampa's membership within Tampa Bay Water, to give you the context of the actions that we've been pursuing over the course of the last 2 years. As you may or may not have known, I know in some of the conversations we've had previously, Tampa Bay Water was created out of a previous water supply authority, then known as the West Coast Regional Water Supply Authority, that was a subscription-based water supply authority and had its own issues that arose over the course of the early 90s, which most people regard as creating water wars. The members were creating litigation amongst themselves because each member owned property in a well field outside of their jurisdiction. There had been unanticipated adverse environmental impacts that arose from withdrawals during that time, and the Water Management District sought to reduce the quantity of water that was being withdrawn in order to ameliorate those environmental impacts. The legislature sought during that time to create a different water supply authority and enumerated in Chapter 373 what that water supply authority was going to be based on. And hence Tampa Bay Water, after about a year of what we call the Committee of 18, which was 3 representatives from each of their member governments, met to create what is the interlocal agreement, the amended and restated interlocal agreement of 1998, which is the governance document of Tampa Bay Water. Of the 5 members, there are 3 counties and 3 cities, and we are a member, a full-fledged member, albeit that we are a different type of member because when we agreed to become a member, we retained our water supply, our consumptive use permit, which allows us to withdraw 82 million gallons a day annual average from the Hillsborough River. There were other considerations in there as well because we were relying on surface water. We had a Morris Bridge well field, which was our, and I'm going into technical here, but which was our peaking facility, which supported the withdrawals from the river. But when you became a member, all groundwater facilities were sold to the Water Supply Authority, and we were left with our 82 MGD. And that's the Morris Bridge facility to which Mr. Weber addressed earlier. So as we move forward through the years, 20 years later, we find ourselves, of course, still a member, but there are restrictions on being a member. One, that Tampa Bay Water is the sole and exclusive provider, wholesale provider of water to all of its members, except for the city of Tampa because we self-supply the first 82. And actually in a small quantities, each of the other members have consumptive use permits because situations would have arisen where they have acquired what they call isolated facilities. You offer it back to the Water Supply Authority. If they don't want to incorporate it into their system, then a member is allowed to keep that. Pasco County has one in particular that I can remember, and I think other members do as well. So at this point in time, when we were considering the augmentation project, we had to take into consideration what restrictions our membership within Tampa Bay Water might impose on us. And I don't know how much detail, but I'm just going to follow through until you stop me. So we offered revisions to the interlocal agreement, which we called the red line document, and it brought the members to the forefront on how we could incorporate reclaimed water projects into the membership of Tampa Bay Water. And because we were one of the first to bring this forward, in addition to supporting our 82 MGD, we were proposing that we would self-supply a potential amount of water over the 82 for growth. Hillsborough County also has a reclaimed water project, which is known as SHARP, South Hillsborough Area Regional something project, SHARP. And so, but their project is allowed under the interlocal agreement, and so it doesn't contravene any of the conditions of being a member. There was, let's just say there was some pushback from the other members of Tampa Bay Water, and there was different actions that were taken. We proposed, well, if the Tampa Bay Water membership didn't want to incorporate what we were proposing to revise the interlocal because they were relying on the current legislation, then maybe we should change the legislation. We offered revisions to the statute. It didn't pass, but it brought together a group from Tampa Bay Water and the City of Tampa and the Water Management District that facilitated a conversation over the course of 6 to 8 months that created the Tampa Bay Augmentation Project MOU and agreement, which was considered over the course of 6 or 8 Tampa Bay Water meetings, which was negotiated in front of the board. Fast forward to June, we had been negotiating with the Tampa Bay Water Board for different clauses to be added to this agreement. And at the point in time, the session had ended. The district had made a determination that our project was not going to be eligible for co-funding because of a policy that they've adopted, which is if you're a member of a regional water supply authority, then to develop an alternative source of water, you had to have permission from the water supply authority. And if you had that permission, then you were eligible for co-funding. But we hadn't gotten the permission because we were trying to get that permission through the course of the agreement. The offer for the 1.6 from Tampa Bay Water came in the form of an agreement to which we were not allowed to negotiate before we ended up in front of the Tampa Bay Water Board. Once I received the agreement, I offered revisions. There were good basis that we believed for the revisions. They were rebuffed by Tampa Bay Water, and they adopted their version of the agreement, which we said we couldn't agree to their clauses. So as you all well know, when you're in negotiations with an agreement, if one party walks away from the table, that's what we did with Mr. Miranda's, as you indicated, withdrawal of the consideration of the 1.6 agreement. So I think that brings the context.
Okay, well, you cleared it up, Jan. I appreciate that. I guess my only final question is, let's hypothetically say we try to go forth with this. Is there going to be legal ramification with Tampa Bay Water? Are there going to be any type of issues like this?
That in 6 numbers, and I wouldn't be in here tonight. I really don't know that I could foretell what Tampa Bay Water would do as far as, or any single member would do as far as any kind of legal process. We have been following what we thought was the path of true regional negotiation as a member of Tampa Bay Water, and negotiating with the representatives of Tampa Bay Water as an entity and as with the members. And so at this point in time, we have withdrawn from consideration the agreement that we'd been negotiating for 6 or 8 months. We've withdrawn from consideration, obviously, as I just indicated, the cooperative funding agreement. And we are here tonight before you and with the mayor to make a determination about whether we would be pursuing that project or some alternative thereunder.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you. I'm not going to go everything Jan said. I more likely couldn't present it any better than she did.
Good job.
Let's go from 1998 to about 2000. Within those 2 years, the city of Tampa offered Tampa Bay Water about the same process, but under TWRP it was called. And they didn't consider it, the members did not consider it as one of the final 3 that they were looking at. So that's fine, they did what they had to do, and we continued doing what we had to do. However, when you start looking around and you start to understand, and Jan touched on something that is very critical in my mind anyway, when something is changed just by policy, not by rule or not by law, and all of the members, the 9 members of that body got elected just like the 7 members of this body, including the mayor's 8, then you start to think, let me understand this. I have to, before that happened, we could go directly to the Southwest Water Management District and present our case. It has to meet certain criteria, and you either get it or don't get your funding, because there's 16 counties that pool their money. Every year, all those 16 counties, there's a little thing when your homeowners, when at the end of the year you pay your bill, your tax on ad valorem taxes, there's something very small, $3.50 or $8 or whatever it is, to help support the agency. And I agree with that. It's the best way, because if you don't have something like Swift Mud, you have a mock. Everything will be going crazy. There'd be no environmental protection to speak of. There'd be no water supply like we enjoy now. So I agree with that. However, now we have to apply to the agency that we sit in, and they themselves are applying for grants. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying that it looks kind of awkward at best. So we have to compete against the one that we're asking for, where they themselves are asking for grant. I never said this to anybody, but it brought up about, listen, the FBI can come check me, my phone, my water bill, my money, anything they want. I have nothing to hide. I'm not the president. So let me say this again. And I don't mean that to be funny, and I don't mean that to disgrace any president. I didn't say president of what. So when we look at these things and you start to understand where I sit at, it's not a city council position. Mayor Greco appointed me there. Mayor Horry appointed me there. Mayor Buckhorn appointed me there. Now Mayor Castor extended the appointment. What I see coming in the city of Tampa, and the length of time, you can check the record, not only of the city of Tampa, but you can check the records of Tampa Bay Water or anyone else that's in the water business, and you have to look how far in advance you have to look to get what you need by that point that you need it. And it's not 3 or 4 or 5 years. I can guarantee you that. It takes that long just to get permits and the understanding of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to fix it, and what the results are going to be. You have to have all these studies done, and not by me, by professional engineers, professional people that do water business, and they're ultra intelligent and ultra conservative. So then, what happens? In my opinion, and I'm not disagreeing with anyone, I got my own opinion of this. The city of Tampa is doing the right thing to present it. Whether the people want to accept it or not, people meaning the elected officials, it's up to them. I'm only responsible for one vote. I've never asked anyone to vote my way. I've never asked for any favors from this board, from the Tampa Bay Water Board, or from any board I've ever served on. So what I'm saying in general is, the city of Tampa is like Johnny Carson would say, you've hit the fork in the road. Which one are you going to take? What does that mean? You can take the road to fix something, or you can take the road and leave it like it is. And not just in the monies that we've lost, but I guarantee you the last 3 years, and I can go further back, but the last 3 years, between the 1,201 water breaks that we've had in the city of Tampa and the amount of work that the wastewater department has spent in equals about $20 million a year. If that's the standard today, what's going to be the standard for 10 more years down the road? You think it's going to be 20? You think it's going to come down to 15, or it's going to go up to 30? I don't know that, but probability tells me it's not going to get any better. So let's say 20 years, at $20 million a year, you don't do anything. How much is that? That's just the cost of doing what we're doing now. We are in the threshold of either having what we need. These figures are not mine. The figure of population growth is not mine. But I can tell you that the people who were born in Tampa, for whatever reason, are coming back to live here. And mainly those in the Midwest are coming to live here. The state of Florida gets between 800 and 1,000 people a day moving in. And again, I can't build a wall. Hillsborough County is going to be one of the fastest growing county in the region, if not the fastest, followed closely by Pasco. Pinellas is mainly built out. The city of Tampa, being the hub of the biggest city, Hillsborough County, is going to get one of the more likely 35 to 40% of that increase in population, whatever that number is. So what happens down the road when 20 years have passed and you got now, instead of having 380 million, you got 480 million? That's just a guesstimate. I'm not telling you to hold me true to that from the figures that I've seen. What happens then? Do we go back and regress and say, oh, the council did the right thing, or the council didn't do anything at all? I can tell you that I've also talked to water engineers, and I'll ask them to come if they want to show their facts and figures here. Now, one of them has told me that this is not a viable situation. And these engineers have worked in water their whole life. So what I'm saying is, you can say anything you like, you can believe anything you want. That's what America's all about. We forgot about that part. But I've never, ever sat in a position where the vote that we're going to take, whenever that date determines to be, the most important vote I've ever taken in my 25 years of public service. It's also the most costliest vote. But if it's not done, where are we going? You can't, we tried to do the option of reclaimed water to the grass until we realized when we got into it, it was fine, but the cost and the ratio and what you saved never matched up. So we had to stop it. And we took some heat. You know, when you sit in these offices, never think of an election. Whatever you do I really campaign? No. I campaign 364 days a year. Election day, I don't do anything. I raise money and I get most of it back. If I get elected, I serve. And if I don't get elected, I serve myself. So what I'm saying is these votes that we're going to be taking in the future are the most important vote in my 25 years of public service. No matter what side you're on, realize the other side. And if you're on this side, realize the other side. And that's what makes America great. We forgot about the people. We think about ideas, and no matter who you are, I don't know how they can think of all these ideas up there, but they do them. And none of them has worked. You have to have cooperation and understanding between one another to realize what's going on. Am I perfect? Never. I've never been perfect. Am I ever going to be perfect? No. But I'll tell you what, I don't know anyone else that's perfect. So what I'm saying again is, all of you in the audience, think about all this and think how you would vote if you were one of these 7 chosen seats. And then tell me how you feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else? Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Thank you, Ms. Miranda. I've got some questions, Chuck. A whole series of them, Mr. Chairman. So
Go for it, sir.
Be patient with me.
Yes, sir.
First, I wanted to welcome the Mayor's Youth Corps. Raise your hand if you're Mayor's Youth Corps. All right. I'm glad you're here tonight because this is a great civics lesson for you to really see how important decisions are made. And this is a decision that if you stick around the Tampa area, as Mr. Miranda said, will affect the future and affect your future. So that's why we have to be very cautious with our decisions from an environmental and from a financial perspective. But welcome. Chuck, the 2026 demand that you talked about, I think you said 16 additional MGD, correct?
2040.
2040?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what's the 2026 demand?
That's when our demand will hit 82 MGD, which is our supply permit off of the Hillsborough River.
Oh, I see. Okay. So then I assume there's a relatively flat line incrementally above from 2026 to 2040?
It goes up.
No, I meant flat line up.
Straight line, yes.
Straight line up.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So the 2026 demand and/or the 2040 demand is based on what percentage of increase in population? I haven't seen the Bieber numbers and all that. So
I don't have those numbers committed to memory, but I could certainly get you that information.
Okay. Yes, please do. So, and I've been asking this question for the last month or two, is what portion of all of this will new development, new people who are coming into our community be paying for? So you're coming in and you're asking for $300 million, give or take. If we went with one particular option, it'd be more if you go with another option. What percentage of that will the new folks who are moving in from Michigan, New Jersey, et cetera, what percentage will they be paying, and how do we get that money from them?
Well, we are looking at capacity fees. We're finishing up a study that we believe will be done in, I believe, a month or so. And I guess when we have that, we can answer those questions in greater accuracy. But one way to think about it is if in 2040 our demand is going to grow to 16 MGD, when you compare that to the total demand, it's not a very large percentage. the revenues you're going to be able to recover because it's an impact fee are only going to be from folks that come here. It's not something that's going to be retroactive. So it's not going to be a large percentage as we get going, but what we intend to do and what the study's looking at is to revise those impact fees, I believe on a regular schedule that's somewhere around every 5 years. So as we do new projects, even projects within this program, if we implement the impact fees sometime soon, as those projects come online, they will get into that assessment. And every time we do the refresh and take a look at how many new projects have come online that have added capacity, whenever somebody moves into the area and gets a connection, they'll pay for those new portions as they come on.
Well, so I think what you're saying is that the people who are currently here are going to have to fund the increased capacity until those other folks get here?
Well,
And there's no other mechanism to chase back that money, to claw back that money? How's that for an economics term?
You have to have the money in hand to build something and you can't build it unless you have the money in hand.
Right.
So we have to build it first. We have to pay for it first.
But what I'm saying is there's no mechanism in that report that just came out to claw back that money?
The report isn't back? Let's wait and see.
No, the draft is back. Brad told us this afternoon.
I haven't seen it, sir. I apologize.
Okay, well, we haven't seen it either, which leads to my next question is you're asking us to approve something without being able to answer that impact fee, capacity fee question thoroughly.
The impact fee.
I mean, I know you can dismiss it and say it's not a big deal.
No, it is a big deal, but its effect is small.
Okay. All right, my next question is, under drought conditions, could we pump the tertiary treated wastewater, okay? Could we pump that into the reservoir? You've been talking about one of these options, I can't remember which number it was, it might have been 2, gets pumped into the aquifer, and then we pull it out of the aquifer. It's drought conditions that we're really concerned about, at which point the reservoir starts dropping below the dam, above the dam it starts dropping down. I remember it got pretty low, Brad, right? Probably catfish kicking on the bottom or something. But anyway, so my question is, during those drought conditions, could we pump the tertiary treated wastewater up above the dam into the reservoir to replenish? Maybe that's option 5 or something, I don't know.
Well, we can certainly discuss it as we move forward talking about the options. It does present some other challenges. There'll be additional permitting.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. From a regulatory perspective, can you pump the tertiary treated water directly into the reservoir?
There could be a pathway. We would have to study it, find out what we're dealing with. The NPDES, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permitting would definitely be something that would be in play. The other thing that we would have to figure out would be if we are pumping if we wait for the reservoir to get low in a drought and then start pumping 50 MGD into it, will we be able to catch up fast enough, or will 50 MGD be enough to keep the reservoir?
Well, the reason, and I'm not taking any credit for this at all, the reason I'm raising this is because there's probably about 30 people out there who've been emailing us saying they're extremely concerned about pumping treated effluent into the aquifer for a variety of reasons that I'm sure they'll tell us about when we get to public comment. But you've read them too, and you've heard them. So I don't understand why this hasn't been thoroughly studied as, quote, option 5.
Well, it has to do with averages, maxes, and min flows. And I'm not sure that 50 MGD would be enough during a drought if we waited till the drought.
I'm not asking you to make those calculations sitting and standing at the podium. I'm saying, why didn't we study it thoroughly, just like we've studied the heck out of options 1, 2, 3, and 4?
I'm sure there's a lot of iterations that we haven't studied that we could say, why haven't we studied those?
All right. Well, if I just thought of it, it must be pretty obvious. one, because Lord knows I'm not that kind of scientist. All right. How much water do we pump from Sulphur Springs to Augment under our permits?
I believe it's 16 CCF. I don't have that in MGD off the top of my head. Brad, can you help me out? CFS. About 10 MGD.
About 10 MGD? Okay.
Million gallons a day.
And again, going back to possibly this option 5 that I was just talking about, could we take the treated wastewater during certain periods of time when we feel the need and augment below the dam, at the base of the dam, which would go downstream to meet the regulatory requirements for refreshing the river, which is very important and also required under a permit? Would that be allowed under the regulations?
It's possible.
Okay. So I'm going to put that down as possible.
If I,
Go ahead.
Brad Baird, Public Works Administrator, if I could address that, Councilman Dingfelder.
Sure.
We did look at that option in very much detail. A little over 10 years ago, it was called downstream augmentation.
I remember.
And it turned out it was not doable because it was not permittable by the regulatory agencies.
Why wouldn't it be? If it's tertiary treated and we can pump it into the aquifer, why couldn't we just?
The primary reason was because of introducing too many nutrients downstream. Then some of the modeling showed that there would be additional algal blooms, algae growth, if you will, downstream. That was a primary reason, but there were other secondary reasons why downstream augmentation was not permittable by the Department of Environmental Protection.
But we haven't looked at that in 10 years.
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So,
all right, I've got a few more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. Yeah. Now I can't read my own writing here. Let's see. All right. At one point you said there's no Sulphur Springs improvement. Okay, I guess Brad just answered that. My question there, you said there's no Sulphur Springs improvement, but if we stop pumping, let me put this in the form of a question. If we stop pumping out of Sulphur Springs, wouldn't there be improvement? We don't. I mean, it seems like nature kind of fixes itself to a certain extent.
Well, if you
or have we done irreparable damage to Sulphur Springs?
If you recall the graph, it was getting saline before we started pumping it heavily at a lower rate.
Right.
It's quite possible that would continue at the lower rate.
But if we found an alternative source and we were able to stop pumping from Sulphur Springs, I would assume that it's going to improve itself or at least remain static.
Well, history has shown it's going to continue to get worse, but not at a higher rate as when we're pumping it.
Okay, let's talk about funding for a second. I keep hearing the number $300 million, I guess, or more, depending on which option we went with. But I've also had discussions with you guys where you talk about, and even here in this report, you talk about a 50-50 grant from SWIFMUD. So why aren't we talking about $150 million and the associated rate hike associated with $150 million instead of $300 million?
I wasn't discussing any SWIFMUD grants in the presentation.
No, you didn't, but I've had that discussion with you guys previously.
The way that the debt is structured under pipes is 53% pay-go and 47% debt. And if we are able to get grants, we will be able to reduce the amount we have to borrow, and that will reduce the overall cost of the whole program. So the 3.2 will be less. So if we get grants, that'll be a good thing. It'll help us reduce the amount that we have to pay for by debt and reduce the overall cost.
But shouldn't that benefit transfer to the ratepayer also?
Yes, it will.
But in which case we don't need the whole $300 million, we'd only need $150.
It will, when we don't have to pay the overall cost for the whole program, in the future, we won't have to raise rates higher.
But that doesn't translate to what you all are asking us to do next month, which is to raise the rates higher permanently. I don't see a contingency that says, if we get a grant, we won't have to raise it as much. I've never heard that as part of the rate hike program. All I've seen is a rate hike that just goes like that, you know, over 7 or 8 years, ultimately to be double what it is today after the 8-year period. But I don't see anything that says, oh, maybe it only goes like this if we get the grants from the state.
At the end of the resolution, the rates that we're calling for, they're left level. So at that point, based on what we can predict today, we will be able to keep up with the renew and replacement of the infrastructure, the pipes, the treatment plants. So at that point, the way things is structured, we should be able to keep up from then on. But that far out, it's hard to predict what changes may occur.
Well, I guess my bigger point is, and again, this goes a little bit into the pipes, and I know y'all didn't want to go there, but you sort of opened the door on it, was shouldn't we be as conservative as possible in terms of the rate hikes, as opposed to just saying we need that 3.2 no matter what, come hell or high water, no pun intended.
I'm going to have to defer to the financial folks
Right.
because I think.
I don't want to get lost in that. My last question goes back to one of your earliest statements. You said we need council to approve this $300 million rate increase now, and this goes to Mr. Carlson's point a little bit a while ago. We need council to approve this now because we don't want to come back to the ratepayers for additional hike at some later date. Isn't that sort of a policy political conclusion as opposed to a scientific water department conclusion?
I'm just basing it off of the estimates that we say we're going to need.
No, I'm talking about the urgency of I mean, there's some unanswered questions that have just arisen tonight. But you're still asking us to approve it, and what you said was, don't we need to do that? Shouldn't we do that now as opposed to coming back at a later date, 6 months from now or a year from now, when we have more answers? You know, and I'm just saying that's not really a water department scientific issue. That's more of a political policy issue, right?
I will just speak to the numbers that we have. In 2017, we exceeded our permitted capacity in a mild drought. If we have another drought, the probability says we are going to exceed demand today, if it happened today. In 2026, we'll exceed the projected demands for our permitted capacity. We need to start building for that now. I failed to mention earlier, we are not the only utility that has concerns with the water quality from Tampa Bay Water. The chairman of the Tampa Bay Water Board has expressed in at least 2 board meetings this year her concern for water quality issues.
Chuck, I understand. We got a long night. The bottom line is I'm talking about a short-term delay, relatively short-term delay. Many of us just got here 3 or 4 months ago, including the mayor. Okay, this is coming on very, very quickly, and this is to me, the much more controversial issue, more than the pipes, and I've been saying that for 2 months. The pipes, to me, ironically, $3 billion for the pipes program, to me, is much more palatable because it's not that controversial. It's something that's been kicking down the road for many, many years. But this one, okay, this part of it is controversial. There's unanswered questions. And I don't see the urgency of why we can't wait 6 months to a year to make that decision. It's a rhetorical question. I'm not even asking for
I'd
an
really
answer.
love to answer it if you give me the opportunity. The water quality issue is real. Tampa Bay Water has hired engineers to study it and to present options to resolve the water quality issue. If it's not resolved soon, when we need water, even if right now during a drought, we are going to have a lot of water quality problems.
Is their water unhealthy, or does it just smell bad?
During
Because
the
I
time-
haven't heard any testimony that it's unhealthy. If it was unhealthy, I don't think you would have been using it.
During the time that we were provided water in 2017, 3 tests were taken in the period of 3 months. Those 3 tests showed that the water quality met Exhibit D, which is the drinking water standards. But there's more to the story. That doesn't match the testing that we do at our drinking water facility and provide the rest of our system. We take hundreds of samples a day. In addition to that, the water that comes through that source is treated to different drinking water standards. There's groundwater drinking standards and surface water drinking standards. And they have different processes that remove different contaminants. So what I'm saying is, based on the information I have, which is limited, yes, the water's safe.
Right. So there's no urgency or emergency, because they have safe drinking water to sell us. So right this very minute, I'm not asking you to create an unsafe situation where we're going to run short of water, because there is water over there, and you just said it's safe. Might not smell as good, might not be as good by our standards, and I'll agree with you. I think you guys, Brad, have been making great water for many years. So our water is a little bit better, but it's not, their water is not, quote, unsafe. All right, I got nothing else. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Carlson.
Just to respond to that, and I don't want to get into a long tit for tat, but Tampa Bay Water is going through a review of water quality, not because the water quality is bad, but because they do a periodic review. I think there's somebody from Tampa Bay Water here who could address that, but I don't want to waste everybody's time tonight. I suggest we invite Tampa Bay Water and Swift Mud to come back and address us at another time to give their point of view in what I feel like is an unfair representation. You just explained that it is different sources, but you still insist on using the term water quality to try to scare people from wanting to use the water, and people throughout the region are drinking the water, and it's not harming anybody. It's certainly not as dangerous as drinking the water that will be reused. Let me just present another. I don't want to go till 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'll just tell you my suggestion. I think we should take the $300 million out of the budget next week. We don't need it. We don't need this anytime in the near future. This is fiscally reckless to engage in this project. It needs scientific study. It needs third-party review. We need a robust discussion with the public, not what's gone on the last week with 4 half-hearted public meetings. This is a huge decision for the public, but most importantly, set aside the environmental and the health issues that have been raised and are going to be raised by the public, I think. It's fiscally reckless because we don't need it. He just said we don't need any other source until 2026. And by the way, during the drought when we needed 30 or 40 MGD, Tampa Bay Water supplied it. So there's no shortage of water. It's not like we're going to turn on our taps and there's going to be no water there. Tampa Bay Water has a 30-year plan for water and a 10-year supply, and they update it every year. The reason that they have never taken on this project, one is that the city of Tampa asked them to take it off their list. The other reason is that it's not the safest, cheapest alternative for new sources in the future. If at some point in the future, 10 or 20 years, we will probably need this project, but we don't need it right now. And what I suggest is that you all can vote for whatever you want, but what I suggest is that we spend the next year or two studying this more, getting third-party analyses, and then come back at some other point in the future. If we don't need it, why would we pay all this money? Why would we collect money from ratepayers? Those of us who were at the Cyrus Green Community Center the other day, the community is very concerned about this $40 or $50 a month increase, and whatever it is, 10% of it is going to be this project. So for people who are on fixed incomes who can barely make their monthly payments, it's especially important. Even if it's $4 or $5 a month, why would we make them pay for 10 years $4 or $5 a month for something we don't need for 10 or 15 years? There is a hybrid here where we can, in 2026 or during droughts, when we need extra water, we can buy it from Tampa Bay Water. And at that point, we can start planning for the future to provide our own our future sources, or as intended by the the interlocal agreement in Tampa Bay Water, Tampa Bay Water will build the new source and they'll supply it to us. If they ended up building this project, then we would only own 1/6 of the debt and 1/6 of the liability. Why would we take on all the debt and do this ourselves? It's fiscally reckless.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Citro, then Councilman Goods.
Mr. Chair, I won't be long at all. Chuck, just ballpark figures, how much water are we pumping into the aquifers now?
Into the aquifers?
Yes, sir.
About 1.5 billion gallons a year.
If any one of these 4 plants go through and we have to pump more water into the aquifer, how much more are we going to be pumping into the aquifer?
Well, it'll be different because we'll be pumping it in and pulling it out at the same time. We'll be flowing at a rate of roughly 50 million gallons a day under one option. Other options, I think, would average closer to 28 or 30 mg.
When you say that it is to the primary drinking water standards, compare that to the standards of the aquifer. It took hundreds, if not thousands of years for that water to be purified to get to the aquifers, didn't it?
The water in the aquifer is not absolutely pure, no.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Councilman Goods.
I tell you, it's hard when you have to make decisions that affect the livelihoods of people, especially when you're talking about money and health concerns. I guess for me, and I know many viewers are watching, I guess they get a little bit confused when we talk about water, pipes, and sewer. We talk about money for water, pipes, and sewer. Now, if we have water now, and it's not an urgency right now, and we can get water from somewhere else, I don't know why we're pushing it so fast. We have a new council here. This is a lot of stuff dealing with this water. We came in the door, automatically established rushing the water program down our throats. It came from the last administration, so we can't blame you for that. You just following the trail. It's a lot to absorb. It's a lot for the community to absorb right now. Now, when I first met you guys, I said, listen, I know we have some issues with our pipes bursting. I was a police officer, so I know pipes burst. Stood in traffic posts, hours on hours, waiting for our guys to come out there and our son fix them. I have a business. Pipes burst at my house. In my business, waited 3 months almost for it to get fixed. Called every day. To finally, we had to get, private contracts because we have so many pipes that are busting in the city that we've got so many contractors that are working because our guys can't keep up with the pace of the pipes bursting. Now that I understand. That I think the public can understand right now when you talk about pipes bursting with sewage, water coming out. People can understand spending physical responsibility money to get those things fixed. And I will be an advocate. Okay, I know because I experienced it and I was pissed off, be honest with you, that I had to wait 3 months and sold all the businesses on my street because if a fire would have broke out, the nearest fire hydrant was almost 2-3 blocks down the road. So for me right now, I think, I know it's an emergency to staff, but right now, for me, I need to absolve a little bit more to understand the big need. Now, we were talking about pipes. I'd be right there in the front line because I know those are needed right now because I've experienced that. But I think I'm going to need a little bit more study with this water because when you talk about we have it now, the water's safe that we're getting from Tampa Bay Water now, I don't see the urgency. I think we need to look a little bit more before we make a vast decision on this type of money. But again, if it was the actual pipes, I can understand that, but I'm not too sure about water right now.
Anyone else? Councilman Maniscalco.
And I'll echo what my colleagues have said. What is the urgency? I mean, the pipes are one thing because we have water main breaks everywhere. We had one last night in the same location that it's broken or busted I don't know how many times, and the neighborhood gets frustrated. I see the Twitter updates from the city of Tampa, water main break, street closure, whatnot. That's one thing. But with the water, with TAP, what we're talking about here, who else does it? Where does it originate from? I mean, we're not going to be the first to do it. Where does it begin?
Well, I have a video that can show you worldwide where it's done if you'd like to.
How recent is this process? I mean, is this something that's come up in the last 5 years, or it's been done in other places? Someone pioneered it 50 years ago.
It's been done for decades, and it's being considered today. In El Paso, there was a piece in the news that they're doing a project exactly like this one. They're contemplating it right now. Hillsborough County's actually piloting a direct potable reuse project. Altamont Springs just completed a reuse pilot that used biological active filtration and ozone. They won a worldwide award and went to Japan to accept it. Gwinnett County, Georgia has a reclamation facility that puts water into Lake Lanier. It comes right through Lake Lanier to their drinking water facility. That's been in service for a while. In fact, there's people in the audience who worked on that project. So this is something that's very real. It's done around the world. It's done here in Tampa Bay. Even in Tampa Bay, Clearwater has a permitted project. They've chose not to pursue it at the moment. But there is such a thing as unplanned reuse. And that's where wastewater facilities, advanced or tertiary, put water upstream of where people pull water out, even on the Alafaya. There are wastewater facilities upstream Alafaya and drinking water facilities that pull the water out of that stream downstream. So reuse is not something that's new. It's been done for a very long time. It's been done since day one, unplanned. But as far as planned goes, yeah, that's something that's been going on for decades, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. We can watch the video, but I think there's at least 100 places in the United States that are doing it. Would you like to watch the video?
I'd love to.
All right. Yeah, let's love to. Hopefully the AV staff's still here. Can we see the video? I think if I hit that button, maybe.
Roughly how long is the video?
It's short. It's about a minute.
Oh.
A minute or two, something like that.
And to let everybody know, once we're finished with this hearing in about 13 hours, we're going to take about a 5-minute. We're going to take about a 5 or 10-minute recess for the staff and just for everybody to clear their minds, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, here we go. This is unfortunately the map of shows the boundaries of the world is out there, but you can see all the different cities.
Water supply options under consideration include augmentation of drinking water supplies with advanced treatment reclaimed water, known as potable reuse.
Now we missed the beginning, but this is the
There are
United
direct
States. You can
and
see a lot of
indirect
areas
potable
in
reuse,
California.
and there are planned and unplanned indirect potable reuse. Unplanned indirect potable reuse happens daily in rivers and other bodies of water everywhere.
There's El Paso.
If you live in a community that is downstream of another community,
Wichita Falls
chances are you are reusing that community's water. And likewise,
You see Miami,
communities downstream of
Jacksonville,
you
there's
are
Gwinnett
most
County we
likely
mentioned
reusing
earlier.
your water. Potable reuse is practiced worldwide, in the United States, in Florida, and in the Tampa Bay area.
And when they call it toilet to tap, the unofficial term, do you filter out, hormones, pharmaceuticals, steroids? I mean, how does that?
Yes. The processes are specifically designed to remove those things because it's not toilet to tap, it's toilet to the collection system. First thing happens there is monitoring. We look for things that shouldn't come into the wastewater treatment plant, and we get the industries that are producing those things to remove them before they ever get there. That's the first part. After that, in the wastewater treatment plant, there's a lot of advanced processes that go towards removing those contaminants. We've been monitoring our advanced wastewater treatment plant for over a year for over 100 regulated contaminants, but over 200 unregulated contaminants. And what we're finding is these things aren't there. We have detected some, but they're not at a level of concern. And even if we did, they're not the types of things that can't be removed by the processes we have, like ultraviolet light disinfection, the ozone, and the biological activated filtration. have been piloted extensively at Altamont Springs, and I believe JEA has done a study as well. And they have demonstrated clearly with the data that those processes are capable of removing CECs, hormones, pharmaceuticals.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. I have a silly question. It's an elementary question, but in the midst of all this, in terms of the issues that are before us, what is, in a 2 or 3 sentence summary, what is the administration's position on all this? Just in it.
Well, the administration's position is,
just to summarize it for the viewing audience,
we're presenting these options for the first time. We want to work through them. We want to get public input. We want to make a decision. We want to have a sustainable water supply for years to come.
Thank you. Okay, now we move forward to public comment. And let me ask you, how many folks are here to speak on this item? Please raise your hand. Okay, let's go forward. Mr. Robinson first, and everyone who is planning on speaking, please line up, and we'll go from there.
Joe Robinson, let me give my background. Licensed professional engineer since 1982 in mechanical engineering. That's pumping, piping, water, and all of this. Served on Swift Mud Basin Board from 2001 to 2009, appointed by Jeb Bush 3 times, approved by the Florida Senate 3 times. Served on Swift Mud Northwest Hillsborough Basin Board, served on Hillsborough River Basin Board. Got documents still sitting in my house. The FBI ain't looked at them yet, Charlie. Don't worry about the FBI, because if I make the move, everybody's going to be looking around here. This is big money. There is no reason, and the pipes thing said nothing about water source. They say, come here tonight at 5:01. Come here tonight at 5:01, and you'll hear about the water source. Water source need to be delayed. They got a lot of problems. They're rushing this. You are right, Mr. Carson. This does not need to be up here. Let's get the pipes fixed, which people in the black neighborhood are saying costing too much to fix any damn way. And when you ask them who they're going to fix first, they're going to fix the white folks over in Davis Island and Bayshore. They're not going in the black neighborhood if you do get money to fix pipes. And the oldest pipes in the black neighborhood. Now let me get real here. And I'm a licensed professional engineer talking. Other engineers are going to give you a different opinion. The city's got their crony engineers, their crony people that they hire. You know, they don't hire me because I'm not a crony. They hire me because I'm damn good. Else I don't even do it because I really don't need the headache. But I'm here to tell you, this is a rush job. You're trying to put all of this stuff into one damn approval of money because they're scared they won't get an opportunity to do it again. They should not even look at 20 years, but do it on 10 years. Don't include the water source. That is nebulous. It needs more study. They told you it was 10 years, but the last time they looked at something, technology has changed. Since I sat on the Swift Mud Basin Board, things are not the same. Okay? So this is a game up here about getting all this in one swoop. Let's get the pipes fixed first. That's it. All this other stuff, you could wait another 3-4 years. Matter of fact, with a hurricane coming, where in the hell is a drought? They need to be getting all this surface water and pumping it into the aquifer. They need to be getting more reservoirs and surface water capacity, because that's natural God rain, pumping that in the aquifer, which they ought to be doing from Tampa Bay Bypass now. This whole water thing, if you keep going the way you're going, the FBI will be around here, because it comes down to big money, big players, and a lot of backdoor deal going down. Now, I'm going to be quiet, because I ain't worried about nobody, and I ain't worried about no water, because I don't drink city water. I drink Zephyr Hills water, okay? So the bottom line is, and I haven't drunk city water in 20 years. Now, I take a bath with it. I cook with it, but that's about it. I'm telling you, do not approve nothing but the pipes and throw this 300, 400, all this out the window and just keep up with the pipes. That's all people want. Fix the pipes first and come back in a few years and deal with the rest of the
Thank you very much, sir. And I would also...
I got to go and watch the Brooks game, man. I ain't got time.
What a thunderous exit. I would also ask, by the way, council members as well, we usually allow some engagement with the public, but given the fact that we have a number of hearings, I would ask that anybody who wishes to make a point while the speaker is here, after speaker's here, et cetera, just hold off until afterwards, just for the sake of time. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. Brian Fry, 1224 East Clifton Street. I tend to write my things down so that I'm pretty clear in how I feel about what I'm presenting. Many people do agree that we live in a beautiful and a vibrant city. We have over 150 people moving into our region on a daily basis, and it's clear that folks from around the country and the globe, for that matter, as we do, believe that we live in one of the greatest places on this planet. As a successful realtor in the Tampa Bay area, I know firsthand how rapidly our city is growing, and it's important that our infrastructure is able to handle not only our current needs, but our needs for the future. As our mayor, Jane Castor, has so eloquently stated before, and I paraphrase, it's important to invest in Tampa's tomorrow by planning for it today. As population growth continues to permeate our city, our aging infrastructure must be placed at the forefront to ensure that all residents are able to live in and enjoy safe, sustainable communities. Thanks to advances in technology and science, Tampa is able to make a bold and resolute decision regarding alternative water sources for our growing population. It's my understanding that we're about to reach the maximum capacity allowed for withdrawal of water from the Hillsborough River. As a community leader, I urge each of you, our council members, as well as our mayor, to allocate the necessary and appropriate funds to ensure that each of us, the residents of this great city, have access to clean, pure, and safe drinking water now, in the near future, and for generations to come. Because tourism is one of the largest engines of our economy, we must work to protect our precious natural resources. As not just a tax-paying citizen of this amazing city, but as someone who, like many others, chose to make Tampa my home for the rest of my life, I ask that you support the Pipes Project, the research, and the work that's necessary to support an alternative water supply. Please don't allow your politics or your emotions to cloud your judgment, but instead focus on the factual information that supports this necessity. I ask that you support the $300 million allocation within the Pipes program on September 5th for a sustainable alternative water supply for the city of Tampa. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please. And I would ask, please, no clapping, if you don't mind. Thank you, folks. Next, please.
Good evening. Kent Bailey, Chair of the Tampa Bay Sierra Club, on behalf of 19,000 members and supporters. I've thrown away my prepared remarks in the hopes that I can shed a little light, maybe clarify some misunderstandings that you may have experienced as a result of some answers that might have been more forthcoming. First off, my budget does not depend on whether this project goes forward or not. I have no axe to grind here. I benefit from it not one bit, whether it fails or whether it moves forward. I'm not a resident of the city. Saltwater intrusion is a result of overpumping. It's a regional concern, it's a statewide concern. Overpumping is also responsible for lowering the aquifer, which is causing a rash of sinkholes. It's not a phenomenon localized to Sulphur Springs. What we haven't heard anything about tonight is conservation measures. I'm not going to go into details in my remaining 1 minute 55 seconds, but I can tell you that with rainwater cisterns and graywater systems, which you can mandate at no cost to the city, household potable water use is cut by half. Primary drinking water standard, as opposed to Class 1 surface water standards. Councilman Dingfelder mentioned a question, why don't we just pump it into the reservoir? Because you can't, because it's not clean enough. It doesn't meet Class 1 standards. And when you're told drinking water standards, you need to be sure you understand exactly what those standards are. There are many different standards, groundwater standards, surface water standard, and others. Pipes. I've only heard that pipes is not feasible when you're going in and putting in carte blanche, just on top of nothing. There's a lot of neighborhoods in Tampa now that are still on septic tanks, and that really is messing up the river, okay? You're gonna be going in those neighborhoods to replace water mains, put sewer lines in there, get those people off septic tanks, clear up some of our groundwater pollution, and oh, by the way, run the purple pipes when you do it. You can't tell me that that's not cost effective. Direct potable use regulations are coming. We don't have them now in Florida, but they are coming. You need to audit this report. Get somebody who's not standing to make a buck. Look at it. I could spend the rest of the night telling you about the inconsistencies and inaccuracies in it. And just for your record, There is no other project like this. The Clearwater project is reverse osmosis, and I urge you, do reverse osmosis. That would be great. It costs a little more, but it's safe, it is tested. The system in Altamont Springs, do something like that. That'll work, that's safe.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, please.
Greetings, Council. My name is Alexander Metcalf, and I'm a Tampa native. In fact, I'm one of Councilman Miranda's Tampa natives that's moved back in the last year, as many people have. I come before you in support of the city's plan to provide Tampa with a sustainable approach to our current and future water needs. As a former longtime employee of the Environmental Protection Agency, I've learned to trust in consensus science. I trust the science that tells us 150 people are added to our region's already large population every single day. I trust the science that tells us we are quickly reaching the end of our ability to draw fresh water from the Hillsborough River. And most importantly, I trust the science that tells us we have the technologies to face this crisis head on. The measures presented this evening by the city include safe, sustainable, and cost-effective ways of ensuring that every Tampa resident has access to pure drinking water for generations to come. Through taxes and fees and other economic measures, we are all asked to invest in our community from time to time, and right now is another one of those times. To me, in my mind, this isn't so much of a choice as it is a responsibility, because if we choose option 5 and we do nothing, we come back here again in 5 years to have the same conversation all over again. It's a responsibility of the council to do its part to put the future of Tampa at the forefront. I strongly urge each and every one of you to support the appropriate allocation of funds for this project, and I hope that you will make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please.
I'm not going to work. You guys hear me okay? Are you just talking into this? Okay. All right. I'm Marlon Anderson. I live at 5007 West San Jose Street. I'm here to talk about the toilet to tap. I've read the report by the Water Department, the final report from August 2018. The report lists various micro-constituents, also called contaminants of emerging concern, which include steroids, hormones, and pharmaceuticals. Right there in the report, it states that they cannot remove these substances. The report anticipates that the aquifer will somehow provide additional treatment for these contaminants. But this is an unproven theory, and there exists the real risk that these contaminants could actually damage the aquifer. Furthermore, after the effluent is injected in the aquifer, there is in fact no possible way to prevent the effluent from spreading around. They can't just contain it. It's going to go below the city. There's nothing stopping it. Okay. They will not be using reverse osmosis in their presentation, and my question is, why are we not providing the highest and best possible and most thorough level of purification for the people that are going to be drinking water in this city? Why are we settling for anything less? Okay? So based upon all this, we're expected to accept the city administration spending $300 or $350 million, whatever it ends up being, to roll the dice with our health, to roll the dice with our aquifer. I don't think this is a good idea. Instead, if we can do the purple pipes, let's do more of the purple pipes. If not, let's do nothing. This issue came up 9 years ago in 2010. I spoke out against it at that time, and I spoke to Tampa Bay Water. They told me that we had plenty of water to last for the next 10 years. I called Tampa Bay Water again. They said we have enough water to last for the next 9 years, and they have 3 separate projects to augment what we have right now, including expanding the desal plant. So I do not see this dire need for us to do something right away. I feel like we should either do nothing or we'll do the purple pipes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Lorraine Perino, I live on Davis Island. Good evening, council members. Last week I attended the water wastewater meeting at Kate Jackson Center. As I inquired as to how much my water bill would increase, I was surprised when the presenter, Mr. Baird, remarked that everyone in the room would love to have my $51 water bill. Although I remember a time when my water bill was $25. 14 years ago, I made a small investment to have all the grass removed from my front, back, and side yards, and in its place I planted a drought-resistant ground cover in the front and had brick installed in the back and side yards. I conserve water as a way of life. I consider water to be a very precious and potentially limited commodity. The City of Tampa needs to rethink its approach to conserving water. The City of Tampa needs to become very proactive in encouraging Tampa's residents to stop using our precious Hillsborough River drinking water to water its water-guzzling lawns. The idea of lawns was brought to this country by people who had traveled to England in the 1700s and who admired the lawns at the mansions of the aristocrats. Centuries later, the aristocrats are mostly gone, and the mansions are mostly in disrepair. But Americans continue to use pure drinking water to water their lawns. Now the City of Tampa is asking residents to drink treated toilet water as a water-saving measure, while Tampa's residents continue to use the treated pure river water to water its lawns. It's irrational. The City of Tampa should not subject its residents to drinking treated toilet water, and it should definitely not store treated contaminated wastewater into the Florida aquifer. Both are horrible ideas. Instead, the city needs to initiate an intense public relations campaign and encourage Tampa's residents to rid themselves of their water-guzzling lawns and to plant drought-tolerant native plants and ground covers. That would save hundreds of millions of gallons of drinking water each year, while at the same time helping city residents save thousands of dollars on their water bills. Native ground covers such as Jamaican porterweed and other native plants also have the added benefit of nourishing wildlife, birds, bees, butterflies, etc. In addition, removing lawns also removes the significant amount of air pollution created by lawn mowers and other yard equipment. With the city becoming proactive, enterprising, and encouraging with regards to water conservation, many of Tampa's residents will decide that saving water is very beneficial to them and to the environment in which they live, and will follow the city's good advice. Then happily, none of us will have to drink the water that we flush down our toilets, which will result not only in decreasing our quality of life, but will also result in people avoiding visiting or moving to Tampa in order to not have to drink treated toilet water. Quality of water is the most important thing that people investigate before they move their families or businesses to a new city. As a third-generation Tampanian,
Ma'am, I'll give you 15
I can
seconds
honestly
to
say
finish
that
up.
Tampa has always had quality drinking water, and it always should have.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, please.
Hello, my name's Benjamin Oxhorn. I'm the water reuse chair of the local Sierra Club, and I'm the one who wrote the memo that most of you have gotten. I'm going to do what Council Member Miranda suggested those in the audience do, and that's to put ourselves in your shoes. What I would do is vote to not add the $300 million for toilet to tap. The water department's presentation today did not inspire confidence in what they were saying. What I would do is just take that out. The do nothing option doesn't mean do nothing on finding additional water. It means to do nothing through the Tampa Water Department continuing with the TAP program. What we're asking, and what I would do as one of you, and what we're asking the mayor to do, is to pursue water augmentation through Tampa Bay Water. They use the aquifer just like Tampa would use the aquifer in here. It really needs to be a joint effort. There needs to be environmental regulations that address what would be put into the aquifer. Basically, the chemical stuff needs to be taken out through something like reverse osmosis. But do this through Tampa Bay Water rather than on your own. And if the 82 whatever is hit in a few years, if you need to ask to increase that, you know, a few whatever, then do that instead of the 300 million. So I'm agreeing with what 4 of you have brought up today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please.
Hi, my name's Nancy Stevens. I'm also with the Tampa Bay Sierra Club. I live in Davis Island. I want to thank you for looking at providing clean water to Tampa. Of course, we need that. But I would advocate for conservation, fixing the leaky pipes, and augmenting with buying from Tampa Bay Water and the reclaimed pipes. Converting sewage water to drinking water is risky. There's a lot of contaminants in drinking water, and I'm going to show a couple things here. Can I have that come up? Or this is it doesn't. This is a table from the report. The first column is most of the items are in gray. These are items that are in the sewage water coming out that don't meet drinking water standards. It's not surprising sewage water doesn't meet drinking water standards. I don't understand how that statement was made. There's a bunch of contaminants here that don't meet the standards. There's a bunch of, also, as Kent mentioned, there's other standards. And by the way, drinking water standards are the minimum that you want to provide for quality, because with coming from sewage water, there's a bunch of things in sewage water that you really have to be looking for. Microcontaminants. There's a bunch of other things here that are for another set of standards that it doesn't meet. The first column in gray, a bunch of things that aren't met. The water has to be treated. As mentioned, there's known things like reverse osmosis that can do it. You know, I'm not saying you can't do it, but you got to treat it. You just can't put it in the aquifer and hope the aquifer does it. Skip down. So, for the TAP 2 proposal, how is this water treated? Well, here's some suggestions on how to deal with some of the things that wouldn't be handled by UV light, I believe. And what concerns me in here is some of the answers. How would they treat it? Some of them say there were suggestions to request water quality exemptions, and for another to seek alternative treatment requirements. So instead of meeting the drinking water requirements, they're looking to try to figure out how they can change the requirements so the water they have passes. It's not that it's safe, it just passes some rules. So that's the concerns we have. We want safe water, we don't want to change the rules so that the water we have is safe. TAP's a high-risk proposal that doesn't address the removal of harmful contaminants in the water. There's no evidence in the report that TAP, without additional filtering, such as reverse osmosis, will be able to deliver safe drinking water. In addition, there's reduce the risk of polluting the aquifer or even destroying the aquifer. More study and research must be done. So we need to look at this further. Tampa does need safe drinking water. We need to be careful that we do provide safe drinking water. We shouldn't just be getting funding to start running pipes and putting out glossy brochures to convince the public that it's safe.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Hi, my name's Carolyn Bennett. I'm a lifelong resident of South Tampa. I just want to say that I put a lot of effort into being informed on what's going on in my city. And when Mr. Carlson talked about the 4 meetings about this, that was the first I'd heard of it. And if I haven't heard of it, I can tell you most of the people haven't heard about it. So there has not been the appropriate opportunity for residential input and education on this. And I have a real problem with that. I also want to say that just listening to this, I heard them, one of the council persons asked about, well, how long has this been used and who else does it? And he talked about the Alafai River, he talked about Lake Lanier, and he talked about potable reuse and all these places. I didn't hear him say once aquifer. We're talking about putting stuff in the aquifer. Of all those 100 or so and decades of so, how many of those have involved pumping water into the aquifer? I believe that that was misleading, which concerns me because what else is being said that is misleading us? We need to slow down. We need to take a close look at this. There needs to be public input and education. I also want to just address the problem of density in Tampa altogether. You know, there's all this talk about all these people who are moving here, and one of the reasons that's cited in national studies of areas for people to move is the cost of living or how much money they save by moving someplace. Well, if we need more infrastructure of any type to support the increased population, then the people who want to move here need to pay for it. The people who already live here should not be subsidizing those moves. We are not limitless. You cannot pour a gallon into a quart container. There are certain natural resources which are going to naturally dictate the population. If money has to be invested to support a greater population, then the people who are moving here need to pay for that, not the people who are already here to subsidize it, so it's cheaper for them to move here. I'm not an expert, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I think there's other things that can be done. When you're permitting new construction and an increase in density, that needs to be looked at. An increase in density, are the new homes requiring rain barrels to help pay for their lawn irrigation? Are HOAs, like where my sister lived, who require them to have a St. Augustine lawn, are those requirements being eliminated? Or are new construction, are they requiring landscaping that's not going to use as much water? These are all things that need to be examined, and I urge you to take the time, especially as a new council, to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Our last speaker.
Hello, Nicole Bello, 5009 Excellence Boulevard. I'm a current USF student, and I just want to start off by saying one of the reasons I loved USF and I loved Tampa was for its innovative nature. And I believe that we should look towards science and we should look towards supporting the Pipes project to be more innovative and sustain our water resources. If we wait until we reach our maximum capacity, I believe it'll be too late. And I support the decisions that, sorry, a little nervous, that once it's too late, it will cost more to fix later on, sorry. And I want just to live a safe and productive life. I know Tampa, I call Tampa my home. I want to keep continuing calling Tampa my home for the rest of my life. And I hope to just be a little spark in the younger generation to support this Pipes project.
Thank you. Let me ask, is your father Jose?
No.
Okay, just wrong bellow. Okay.
There's a lot of us.
I bet you're right. Okay.
Well, Chairman, you learned.
I tried. Councilman Maniscalco wanted to say something.
You know, when I had asked the question, how long has this been done in other places? How many other places have done it and whatnot? I know one of the answers was they went to Tokyo, they went to Japan to get an award for the process, for the science behind it. And it made me think of other things that got awards, like DDT in the late 1940s. DDT in the late 1940s, I think a chemist named Mueller, Paul Mueller, received the Nobel Prize for its use in like 1948. Years later, we started seeing it banned because of it being linked to environmental issues with animals in the wild, carcinogens, leading to cancer and whatnot. But at the beginning, people thought it was great. During World War II for use of, against malaria and all this and that. Then I thought about nuclear testing. When they were doing it in the 40s and 50s, the safety measures were stay far away from the blast and don't look at the blast. Years later, so many of those people that were exposed to all that radiation got cancer. So maybe I'm going to an extreme with this, asking how it's filtered, how it's done, the science behind it. Do we do this, pump this into the aquifer, which we can't pull out? And then years later, people start getting sick, and we start wondering why so many people are sick in 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too far beyond, but I compare it to DDT and nuclear testing, all these things that were deemed safe and state-of-the-art and award-winning, but then once people get sick, once it's out there, you can't reverse that. Just like once you pump something into the aquifer and you see that there's damage or there's some negativity behind it or it's leading to something greater that we can't control, we can't pull it out of the aquifer. We can't reverse the process. So maybe I think too much because I'm known to overthink everything, but we have to be very careful when we're playing with our water supply and potentially people's health, maybe not right now, but decades down the road. Those are just my thoughts.
Councilman Citro.
Thank you, Councilman Maniscalco. When the nuclear program ramped up here in the United States, both military and for electrical use, our government decided to just dump it at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And we saw the ramifications of that. So thank you for bringing that up, and I would rather not do anything to our aquifers. Thank you, Councilman Maniscalco.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you very much. I didn't come for a confession party, but since everyone talk about confessions, I'll confess myself. I don't have a lawn. I got rocks. Not today, but 20 years ago. I got white grass that I don't have to mow, I don't have to water, but I do have to seed because the birds keep up and they drop the seeds and I got to pick up the little saplings of all the diseases that I don't want. First. Secondly, I challenge anyone to bring a water bill lower than mine. In 2018, I put myself to a test that I wanted to go 1 year without 1 unit of water being used every month. And I got real close, but the water department screwed me up. For 11 months, I had 0. But on the 12th month, when I said I was going to have a success, you challenge yourself to these things, I got 1. And I looked at the bill at first, I said, you know, I failed. Until I looked at the bill again, and the water department during the holidays gave that water meter 3 more days. So it was the 34th day they checked the meter, not on the 30th. So in my mind, I still lost because I don't see it on paper. However, this is not about me. It's just about conversation. I also drive an electric car. So I don't consider myself a environmentalist. I just practice like an environmentalist. There's one which you think about it and one that doesn't. So that's how I think. That doesn't make me a good guy, or certainly doesn't make me a bad guy. But if you look at these options, I think 1 or 2 of these options have ultraviolet. Option 3 of reverse osmosis. So I guess maybe that's the option to take or not to take. But I understand what we're saying. Sometime back, I don't know how long it was. In fact, I forgot the gentleman's name. But I paid his flight from California to come here, and we held a symposium at the University of South Florida. I think Mr. Baird was there. And somebody else paid for his hotel, and somebody else paid for his meal. That's called revenue sharing. And there were over 200 people there. Not one, after that man spoke, was against it. There's not one living microbe when that process that that gentleman talked about was in any water that they serve in California. Now, let me go furthermore. When we talk about other things that came up about water and things that are, we can't control everything in life. If we could, there'd be no hurricanes, no one would die, and we'd be eating each other because we'd be overpopulated. So the problem we have on Earth is us. People say, oh, there's something wrong with the Earth. I know what's wrong with the Earth. It's not the Earth, it's the people on the Earth. We've killed the wildlife. We destroyed the waterways. When you look at some of these scenes that I see on television about the rivers and the lakes and what's happening larger than the size of Texas, there's a place in the Pacific Ocean that's dead of plastic because we, the humans, did it. No one else did it. We, the humans, did it. What happened in Russia the other day wasn't a rocket that had an engine that was, from what I understand, that had an engine that was propelled by nuclear fuel. It was something else that exploded because radiation's testing all over that area right today as we speak. I don't believe in the media as, what do they call it, untruthful or unreliable or whatever it is. But media reports what we do. So if anybody is wrong, it's not the media, it's us. They're reporting what we did, rightly or wrongly. So it's been a long haul. It's been something that I've enjoyed working and doing these things. And it comes a time that the rubber hits the road and we're either going to move forward or move backwards, but we can't stay still. You've heard a lot of things. Sooner or later, if these things that I heard today, well, you keep buying water. If you think the water rate's going to go high, keep buying water, see what happens. There's a pass-through that comes through every month. I hardly ever get it, but I see it there. And it irks me when I get charged 7 cents and 15 cents for water from somebody else. We are governed by the elected officials of this city. We have been since I don't know when. Have we made mistakes? Sure, we do. So have they. So have you, I think. So we're all human beings. Presentation today was adequate. Was it the best I've seen? No, and I'll tell you why. It was never brought to the comparison of other areas that are trying to do the same thing we're trying to do to show how long they've been doing these things. I'm not disappointed in the presentation. I'm not disappointed in the presenters. But the subject matter was not addressed directly. And I think if there's any fault, it lies in the subject matter not being directly compared to another system just like what we're talking about, and how long they've been using it, and how many deaths were caused by it. Fear, like Churchill said, is the only thing you don't have to fear. Because guess what? Nothing in this world lasts forever. Not this microphone, not this piece of wood, not Charlie Miranda for sure. But all of us are in this boat ride together, and we're not going to swim or we're not going to sink. We're going to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Goods.
Well, Mr. Randa, as the legend that you are, you brought up a couple of points that I was going to address, sir. That's why you called the legend.
No, you're the legend, sir.
You talked about fear. When people don't have adequate information, they're fearful. I don't care who you are. When I first met the staff, and we got a good staff, good water department guys, they work hard, you know, and I got to give them their props. They're trying hard to get an idea through this council and to the public. But when I first met them all, I said, marketing is the key to anything. Marketing is going to be the key to the success of your projects. And again, we didn't market it well. We didn't have any presentations of other cities, and I asked about that several times. I talked about that. Tell me other places that are doing this, and show me some videos, show me some stuff. We never got those things. It's the first time I just seen those few cities, but you know, people are visual. You want to see how this process works. Who's doing it? Who's got it? Presentation is everything sometimes. You know, as a police officer, when you are tasked with doing a job, if you don't have all the facts, you don't have all the tools, it doesn't work. You're going to get hurt. You may not come home. Chief of Staff Bennett knows that. Knows that. You don't have all the tools, or you're not given what you need to be prepared, we get hurt. And unfortunately, I think the presentation was decent, but it wasn't all there. And that's why I made that statement earlier that, yes, there's going to come a time we need water. But we've got to give the people a little bit more so we can understand these processes. And I don't think we've done that yet. To say to give $300 million is something that we're not sure of right now, or the public's unsure. You know, you go back to look at the meetings. And I said, well, when people talk about pipes, they're not interested in pipes. They say, okay, well, sewer project's going to put some pipes down there. They don't know about the water situation, what we're trying to do. That's the whole big picture. And I think that's where we dropped the football. We fumbled. Nothing's ever dead. You know, if you don't try, you know, you try again. And I think, you know, we're going to have to try again because it will come up again. Unfortunately, I can't support the water issue at this time. But if it was dealing with those pipes, I would be for that all day long because that's a needed item right now. And everyone knows that. But I can't support this water decision because I don't have enough information. I don't know what it's going to cost the people, how it's going to hurt some folks. I don't really know who has it, what's their success, what the rates of people are getting sick or what have you. And it may be very low, it may be none. But we just don't have that type of data. And I think to move forward with a project of this magnitude, this type of money, we got other issues in the city going on that $300 million could be utilized for. To me, I just think we just fumbled the ball. So again, I can't support the water at this time. But if we talked about pipes going in the grounds for sewer and these water issues that we have, then I would be all for that. But I just can't support it this time.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Carlson.
I have listened to the environmental and health concerns that the people of the city and engineers and others have given. But my biggest concern is that I think this is fiscally reckless and the timing is wrong. In 10 years, I think this might be a good project. And then the question is whether it should be owned by the city of Tampa or by someone like Tampa Bay Water, and whether it should be reverse osmosis or some other technology. So one of the things that was not discussed tonight, and it was in my memo to the Water Department, which they never answered in writing, as they said, we still have 4 or 5 MGD that we haven't used yet. We're not going to use all of that until 2026. In 11 years, so 2030, we're going to need 11 or 12, depending on which number you believe, 11 or 12 million gallons a day. There is somewhere between 7 and 10 million gallons a day lost because of broken pipes that we're now going to spend $2.9 billion fixing. Even if we got 2 or 3 MGD of that back, that still takes us for 2 or 3 more years. Tampa Bay Water and I think SwiftMud estimate that through conservation efforts, which they're willing to fund to educate the public on, and City of Tampa has turned them down, that we could save 4 to 5 million, conservatively 4 to 5 MGD. And through efficiencies found, we could save more. So there's every reason to expect that we could get to 15 years or more without anything. And considering the feedback that we've heard from the public, that even $5 a month is a lot to add to the bill of a fixed income person, I think it's reckless to add anything extra to the bill that we don't need. It's reckless to add this to our debt when we don't need it, and go on down the line. If we're allowed to make a motion, I would make a motion that we take the $350 million out of the rate case for next week and get an annual update from the Water Department on the demand, and in the meantime stop all the millions of dollars that are going out to study this, and then ask them to come back in 5 years and ask us or give us a proposal on, or give future council a proposal on whether to spend money to study this again. But we don't need it for maybe 15 or 20 years, and so why would we address it now and spend the money now when we can wait at least 5 years before we have to bring it up?
Just to clarify what you're saying is, so you're saying to leave the pipes in play but take out the tap project? Yeah,
just deduct from $3.2 billion, whatever exactly it is, take out the, and we've heard 2 different numbers, 300 and 350 million. So I'll take the Water Department's advice on that. But based on their first recommendation, I think they said 350. Take the 350 million out. So instead of asking for $3.2 billion in the rate case, we would ask for, what's the math, 2.85 or 2.95? I'm told by legal that that doing that will not change our notice period. We can still have the discussion next week, and we can't go higher than 3.2 billion, but we can go lower. That'll take this off the case. We have so many things on our agenda that we need to spend 3 or 4 hours to discuss. We don't need to discuss this right now. Water is the most important issue in the future, but the water wars and the water plans were solved in an interlocal agreement by the creation of Tampa Bay Water 21 years ago. And there's all the geopolitical stuff here which could break that water agreement, and we will waste money and potentially put the public and the environment at risk if we do this.
I'm sorry, but I got to answer that. This agreement does not break the agreement between the City of Tampa and Tampa Bay Water. I don't know what engineer told you that. I don't know what attorney told you that, but I'd like to speak to him. And I'd like to ask the city, does this break the agreement with Tampa Bay Water?
Jam Clean City Attorney's Office. When you mean this, you mean the 4 options, you mean the tap?
I don't know what he meant. I don't know which one. Take all 4 of them.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I thought your analysis earlier was very factual, by the way. Thank you for doing it. As I understand it, and you can correct me, one of the attorneys in Tampa Bay Water gave an opinion that we're allowed to do this. St. Pete and maybe one other attorney gave the opinion that we're not allowed to do it. Then Tampa Bay Water, and Tampa Bay Water is the member government board members. Tampa Bay Water hired the original attorney who developed the interlocal agreement. It's like going back to the founding fathers and the what are they called, Louis? The
agreement back in '98.
But when the Constitution was written,
What do you mean?
The thing that Jefferson and
Oh, you mean the Declaration of Independence?
no, the documents that they use, anyway.
Articles of.
No, what are the papers that they developed to?
Federalist
I'm so-
Oh, my gosh, yeah, the.
Anyway,
Federalist, yeah.
the Federalist Papers. So this attorney helped put together the agreement. He has all the original documents, all the original emails, all the original evidence, and he came back with an opinion that it would break the interlocal agreement. And then the city of Tampa objected to it because City of Tampa also works with that law firm, and they objected to it and conflicted him out from. Otherwise, he would have been here tonight giving us that opinion. Did I get it at all right? Or?
No. The one part that you did get right was the General Counsel of Tampa Bay Water did agree that the proposed TAP MOU agreement was consistent with the interlocal agreement, and that included the portion of TAP that would support our 82 and the increased amount that we would need for growth. Beyond that, it was slightly inaccurate, in my opinion. Tampa Bay Water asked for an attorney who had been part of the Committee of 18. I was also within the group that discussed the questions that was going to come up. And the words are, as any attorney that's sitting here, the words on the paper are what they are. And I said that to the gentleman who decided to give us a legal opinion that didn't say that we couldn't do TAP. It said that Tampa Bay Water was the exclusive wholesale provider of potable water to its members. And so then there was interpretations of his opinion that were used to make statements against the proposed project. Beyond that, that's my opinion.
Anyway, my main, sorry to take us on a tangent, my main argument was not I feel strongly not about not unraveling a regional agreement, and there's a long discussion around that besides this issue. But the main issue for me is just the timing is bad.
There's also the attorneys for these 6-member governments. Are those attorneys that you deal with on a daily basis? You all discussed this, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And how many voted against it?
How many voted against? Well, the attorneys didn't take a vote, but with regard to the proposed TAP agreement, we had agreed that it could go forward, but the board wanted additional clauses added to the agreement, and so it never finalized.
But there was only one attorney that I heard under the, and I don't mind saying it, don't bother me one bit, the attorney who represented the city of St. Petersburg through the direction of that elected official was the one that said, absolutely, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. It was a letter that long, that things you couldn't do. From what I understand, I wasn't in the room. The rest of the attorneys felt pretty comfortable what the city of Tampa was planning on doing. I'm not saying they were 100%.
With the agreement as it was proposed, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Dingfelder.
I was out in the hallway a little while ago, and there's like 40 people out there waiting for our zoning hearing to start. So I'm not trying to cut this off. I think it's super important discussion that we're having.
I understand.
But I feel like we're just kind of going around in circles.
And I think these are issues that could come up next week, but we're technically going down, I don't want to call it a rabbit hole, these are very important issues. And issues, by the way, we talk about needing more information, issues that are going to require briefings, frankly, from legal in terms of the ramifications of the votes. That's my opinion, but I'm in charge of procedure, not necessarily substance.
So was I allowed to make a motion? I didn't get a second. If I don't have a second, I'll drop it.
You start talking for discussion, so I didn't. Are you putting a motion on the floor?
Yeah, my motion was to.
Yeah, of course.
My motion was to deduct $350 million from the rate case next week, and stop the studying of this project, and then have the water department come back to us annually for a demand update, and then in 5 years present to the future council a proposal to study this again, because it's not needed for, I'll
Councilman Dingfelder, before, if I may, I've chaired the meeting. I always traditionally wait until the end to say, I just want to say something, if I may, regarding that. I think that's a very, how can I call it, a motion that needs more vetting with regards to the legal ramifications. That's my opinion. I think to vote on this tonight, at this hour, it's only 8, but I think we're all taken up, so to speak. We've got a lot of hearings ahead of us. I think would be premature, given the potential legal ramifications, that frankly, we got to be briefed by legal. That's just my 2 cents on it. Councilman.
Ironically, about, I guess, 2 months ago, staff stood there at that podium with option A, option B, option C, and one of those options was exactly what you just described, Bill. It was pipes alone was one of the options without tap. Do y'all remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't want to think that I'm just made it up. But then it got merged together, and that option of it standing alone kind of vaporized for some reason. So I think, not from a legal perspective, I'm not answering that. You guys can figure it out. But from a policy perspective, I think it's very reasonable.
Yes, sir.
Could I just ask legal, the issues that Councilman Miranda and I were talking about with Ms. McLean are completely separate from this motion. To my knowledge, the only legal impact this motion could have is in the rate case. And my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, if there are other implications, but my understanding from our discussion earlier is that we can reduce the amount of the rate case, but we can't increase it. Is that correct?
We noted, I'm sorry, Jan McLean, with the Office of the City Attorney. We noticed the public meeting for next week at 6 o'clock to consider an increase in rates. And in the notice, there was not actual amount of what we were increasing. So the consideration of what you increase is still open to the council.
So if we decide to decrease the amount proposed or go back to option B instead of whatever the options were, it doesn't affect our noticing of the rate case. And so we can proceed, because I don't want to hold up the pipes project either, and that's a much bigger, more important thing.
No, it doesn't affect the noticing of the public hearing for next week.
Anyone else, Councilman?
There's a motion on the floor, correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. We haven't voted, just for discussion.
I have a concern. I'm in agreement to hold the project up. I have a problem with the 5-year. These gentlemen have been doing a lot of work, and they say a 5-year stretch. For me, I think that's too long. I don't agree with that. Now, if you can amend your motion to where we're saying that we're pulling the $300 million off the table for the TAP program, I'm in agreement to that, to vote on that this evening, but I don't like to hold the progress of the work up if they're still trying to figure out and come back a year from now, 6 months from now, or whatever. But I don't want to put them in a bind and say you stop all work for 5 years.
So if we amended it just to say 1 year, that they would come back to us in a year to recommend?
I could probably go with that, but I can't go with 5 years.
I'll still second that if you amend it to 1 year instead of 5 years.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak before we take a vote?
Could I?
Sir, go ahead. And Mr. Shelby.
No, go ahead, Mr. Baird. I'll ask the clerk.
Go ahead, sir.
If I might, Chairman, Councilman Carlson brings up a good point about the 350 was talked about, 350 million versus 300 million. I would like to clarify that before a vote is taken. The 350 million was an older estimate for the Tampa augmentation project. We have done quite a bit of work since then. The estimate is closer to 300 million. So 300 million is the number that's included in the 3.2 billion, and it is for one of those 4 alternatives. I just wanted to clarify that 300 is in there, not the 350. Thank you.
Would you all be okay if I amended the motion just to say that we would ask them to remove the 300 million from the rate case next week, and that we would, and they would come back to us in a year with their proposal?
Okay. We have any further discussion from council? We have a motion on the floor. We have a second by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay.
The motion carried with Miranda and Vieira voting no.
Okay, everybody, and anything else tonight on this item on the workshop? Mr. Shelby. Oh, no, yeah, that's what I was asking, yeah. Okay, we'll be back in 5, by which I mean 10. I want to thank everybody for your patience here tonight, and I hope you all enjoyed this.